Hey, can you hear me?
You're a bit quiet. Hang on, I'll fix that. Do you want to talk again?
Yeah, you hear me now?
Yeah, that's fine. Okay, what's on your mind? Did you want to start with anything specific? I think the last thing
Um,
you mentioned in chat was
yeah.
Yanukovych and
Well,
Bandera.
first, let me I need to remember exactly what your videos, the whole video. 'Cause I watched it like weeks ago. So,
Are you still? Well, the last thing you mentioned in chat was something to do with Bandera, right?
yeah, if you look up when Stepan Bandera was officially the national hero of Ukraine,
Hmm.
you would know that Viktor Yanukovych, it's actually like the first thing on Wikipedia. I mean, on the Wikipedia page for Stephen Bandera, Hero of Ukraine Award on the 22nd January 2010, on the Day of Unity Ukraine, the then president of Ukraine, Viktor Yanukovych, awarded to Bandera the title of Ukraine Hero of Ukraine posthumously for defending national ideas and battling for an independent Ukrainian state. So how is that a pro-Russian or a Russian puppet?
Where are you getting that Yanukovych gave him the award?
Literally from the Wikipedia page for Stjopa
That
Bandera.
would mean the Wikipedia page is lying. Like that's
Okay,
not what
so
happened. He was
okay, so
so it was between the real it was between his elect. So you know you win an election, right? And then maybe
no,
a
I
month or
didn't know
two
you would an
passes.
election.
So
But go ahead.
so you win an election, and then a few maybe like a couple of weeks or a month passes, and then you're sworn in. So the president at the time, just beginning of 2010, was Viktor Yushchenko. And Yushchenko awarded Bandera the Hero of Ukraine award as he was outgoing. And then 1 year later, when Viktor Yanukovych was in, he was stripped of the title. So Yanukovych stripped Bandera of the title in 2011.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Okay, my bad on that one then.
Yeah, because
You
Yanukovych
got
was
me there.
like unironic, was like holistically
I don't think
pro-Russian.
he
Yeah.
was a pro-Russian president. He was just an opportunist. That was my bad on
Well, if
the
you're an opportunist and your opportunism leads you into doing pro-Russia things, that you're basically pro. It doesn't matter why he's pro-Russian, right? Just the fact that he behaves.
No, it does a little bit. If you're a corrupt asshole, you're a corrupt asshole. Doesn't matter if what is that supposed to if you don't have a framework or an ideology guiding you, you're just going to follow whatever the dominant factions are in your government. And at that time, it was well, since the Orange Revolution, there's been more nationalist factions within the Ukrainian government. But at that time, it was still up in the air whether Ukraine was going to go towards being neutral slash pro Russia or what's the other one? Pro
Well,
NATO slash US.
no, so when it came to in terms
That's
of
why we had
economic
the
deals, you mean?
Euromaidan.
Well, yeah, the Euromaidan happened because for years polling was showing that the majority of Ukrainians favored the EU over
That's
Russia.
not that's not exactly true because if it was, you wouldn't have a civil war outbreak in Ukraine,
Wait,
and you
you
wouldn't.
can have a civil war outbreak even though a majority believes one thing and less people believe another. Yeah, of course you can still have a civil
No,
war over that.
no.
The majority. So like I'm pretty sure.
Majority just it's not a clear majority. Then it's a very controversial
So
topic.
it's a plurality, right? Rather than majority. Would that make you feel more comfortable?
I mean, maybe, but it still doesn't mean that Ukraine was pro EU or pro NATO.
Well, it's that they were more pro EU than they were pro Russia. Yes, and given the fact that it
Okay.
was over a trade deal where they were forced to choose between one or the other, I'm pretty sure both Russia and the EU insisted that Ukraine had to choose one or the other. So if you have to
Yeah.
choose between one or the other, you should probably choose the more popular option, right? If you don't want if you don't want a civil war to break out, right? Or a
Not really.
revolution.
Not really. It would probably depend on what the trade deal is. That's a very complicated question because I mean, one thing to remember with the EU and any country that is either forced or voluntarily, I guess, tries to lean towards the the European Union and NATO is that they're forced to privatize I'll stick to
Liberalize.
privatize. Yeah, privatize their economy, and that's like that's not necessarily a popular opinion amongst the population in the
If
long term. So it might be popular based on like what the people are reading and the propaganda they're being fed. Same with the pro-Russian people, same with the pro-NATO people. They're both being fed a certain type of propaganda and they bought into it.
right, you
And
realize that
but
like post-Soviet Russia generally was very privatized as well, right? Like they literally had a term for
yeah,
it,
it's
like
called
gangster
shock
capitalism.
therapy.
So yeah, yeah.
No, it was called shock therapy. It was
And
forced upon by the Western governments to privatize and essentially plunder the country and the post-Soviet states of anything they had left
also
after
the
the
oligarchs
collapse.
who ended up taking power ever since have been in favor of it as
The
well, right?
oligarchs were a creation of the American system that was forced upon the Russians.
Well,
And any
regardless of whether or not you blame America for it, like Russia
no, no,
built
no.
and it, like
It's completely America's fault. I mean, Yeltsin was a puppet of the United States. The '93 coup was backed by Bill Clinton. A shit ton of money was put into the '96 election of Yeltsin so that he could win. I think the
okay, okay,
communists
okay,
were
okay.
the liberalization and the privatization of the economy was so unpopular that the communists were going to win back the parliament until uh, that's why I think actually Yeltsin had to change the constitution that gave the presidency a lot more powers, which is why Putin is so powerful today. Like
Okay.
modern Russia is completely a creation of of America. Like any problem you have now with modern Russia is blowback from what America did to Russia and the Eastern Europe and Central Asia and the
Right, right. Okay,
Caucasus.
okay. I get what you're
And
saying. I get what you're saying. Even if I grant you all of that, okay? Like
you
I haven't
can't. It's not this. I'm not
okay, okay.
like this is not an opinion. This is
I'm
me being
taking well, I'm
descriptive.
taking okay, listen, I'm taking your word for it, okay? You were wrong about Yanukovych awarding Bandera the award, okay? So
Okay, my bad.
I'm
My
granting you
bad.
this. I'm
I
telling you,
forgot that
I'm
Yanukovych got into the presidency in
so
February
I'm
25th
telling
and not
you,
in January.
that I'll take your word for it. I'm saying, why does any of this affect the decisions of the Ukrainian people when it comes to choosing between a more popular economic deal and the less popular?
Because in the long term, those economic deals will not be popular. I don't think Ukrainian people wanted an IMF loan after the Euromaidan. Do you think they wanted an IMF loan after the Euromaidan?
Well, it was
Because
more to
that's
do
what
with
Ukraine.
joining. It was to do with joining the European, what was it the European Customs Agreement, right?
Wait, so Ukraine was forced to take out an IMF loan to join the EU? That just makes them a puppet of the EU and America.
What
Why
other
would
choice does Ukraine have? They're either a
they
puppet
could
of Russia or of the EU.
unfortunately that's what happens with weak states like Ukraine. If Ukraine wanted to be a strong independent state, they would have focused on what they were good at during the Soviet Union, which was industrial capacity. But unfortunately, because of what America did to the Soviet states after it collapsed, they couldn't reindustrialize
So are you
because of
so okay, I feel like you just before you run down this huge like hypothetical that neither of us can prove
I'm
or
not being
disprove.
hypothetical.
Yes, you are, because you're saying that the IMF, the EU decision would have become less popular long term. Is there any evidence of this? Is there any country that ended
yeah,
up joining with the
literally
Eurasian
any.
Customs Union that was like better off for it 10 years later? What, like
No,
Moldova,
you could look.
Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan? Where has this been a
Wait,
success for them?
okay. First of all, even the successful ones like Lithuania, Estonia, Latvia,
Mhm.
they're not that much better off in the EU
Compared to
than
Ukraine, they absolutely were. Yes.
they have a shrinking population and they're essentially being used as toilet
Compared
cleaners for the rest of the European continent. Come on,
compared to
that's being.
Ukraine. Compared to Ukraine. I can maybe find you a graph if you want of
I mean,
like
also
comparing.
you're limiting this to Europe. We could look at any country that
Well,
takes
no,
out
we're okay.
IMF loans.
Wait. We're talking
No,
about
no, no.
Europe here, though. We're talking about Europe.
Okay, but
Okay.
we're also talking about IMF loans because because that's like that is imperialism by the United States.
Do you
Like,
think the what's it called? What the fuck? No one ever mentions this. I don't know why, but what's it called? The whatever the Russian fund is, the Russian Wealth Fund, or the Russian National Wealth Fund. Do you think that's not predatory?
no, it is because this
Okay.
is we're talking about. Okay, so I guess maybe we have different concepts of um international relations. This is great power politics, and Ukraine is not a great power, so it has to find a patron of some find a new patron to help them, like, develop or get food or even just like the basic necessities. Ukraine can't really survive on its own, and especially with the EU is just forced to be a farming country. Like, all it's good for is exporting grain, which is pathetic,
And what do you
honestly.
think? So Ukraine. You're adding in a lot of things that aren't really answering my question.
What am
Ukraine
I
finds
guess.
itself in a position in 2014 where they have to choose between integration with the Eurasian Customs Union or with the EU. More of them, by quite a bit, want to go with the
Wait,
EU.
I actually don't know the
What should they
polling, but
do?
I'm pretty sure it's still a very controversial. It was very
It
controversial.
was leaning towards the EU for like maybe a decade. It was pretty
How much?
consistent.
What was the percentage? Because if it's like 51 or something, I don't think that's a good reason to join the EU.
But they had to choose between one or the other. So even if it was 1%, then yeah, it wasn't 1%, by the way. I think at some points it was 10 points, at some points it was 5, but it was pretty consistently towards the EU. Yeah.
Okay.
I can look at it here. I mean, I'm actually having to go through my own fucking videos now for this, but like, yeah, this is so you got like 56 wait, so from November 2011, you're 42.40, then it's 45.34, then 40.33, then 53.28 in 2012, 48.32. Like the closest it was before 2014 was like it was 13 points in one of these polls. 11
Oh,
points, 10 points.
again, you're. I don't know how to explain this to you, buddy. This is just because there's like a few pollings that showed a percentage of people
The
wanting to join the EU doesn't mean
Don't say a few
obviously
polls, right?
people
These
didn't
this is
want to.
like a collection of all the polls, all right? Come on.
Okay, okay. Let me back this up for you. If you say joining the EU was so overwhelming, was popular enough, then
Mhm.
why was there an armed conflict? Okay, why during the Euromaidan did people have to, what was it, the Odessa massacre? Why did like right sector have to like massacre all those people? Why did the Euromaidan turn so violent if becoming part of EU and going and moving towards the West was so popular?
So I'm guessing you don't buy the very well verified thing that the Ukrainian police were like basically given a green light to use any excessive force against protesters, right?
I mean,
The fact that
if
Yanukovych was
that
passing anti-protest laws that would have sparked a revolution just about anywhere.
no, it wouldn't. Oh, come on.
Yeah, one of these laws was giving immunity to the police if they committed crimes against protesters.
We have the same thing in America. Where's the
We don't have
revolution?
the same thing in
We have
America
qualified immunity. I mean,
for committing crimes against protesters.
did any
Not to
police
mention like
officer.
excessive fines, like 10-year jail protests for like assembly in the public space. No, you don't have quite the same equivalent in America. No, these were pretty unique anti-protest laws. Yeah.
Okay, all right. And what's your point? So just
My point
because of
is that Yanukovych, whether we can prove he was ordered to or not, the Ukrainian police were shooting protesters and like sniping them and shit. They were killing protesters. I don't know if you've seen video, like you can see videos of this where there's the one from New York Times where you can see the guy runs up with a shield and then a sniper just shoots him like right in between the shield and in the gut. Like, yeah, the police were
okay,
murdering protesters.
I am actually not disagreeing with you that the police were murdering protesters.
Hmm.
I'm from Ukraine. I know they were murdering protesters, bro. It's
Okay.
fine. That's what life is like in those countries. If you're going to protest, you gotta take the risk of getting shot up by the police, unfortunately.
especially if the protest happens just a week after, or even it was the day after. It was the day after they passed a law granting immunity to people who commit crimes against protesters. Yeah, and that's when the death started. It was like
And
2 or 3 days after those laws were passed.
we're talking about this. We're talking about this protest, but you're saying that it's like, this is my problem with liberals. They think that just because people rise up,
Do you think
it's a
I'm a
good thing.
liberal?
Yeah, you're definitely a liberal. If you're pro NATO, you're a liberal. You can't be pro NATO. The reason NATO even exists is just to combat communism. Like all those NATO stay behind missions during the Cold War,
I mean, it's to
you think those
combat.
were
It was to combat a version of communism that not every communist was in favor of.
Oh,
Right?
no. It was to combat communism. There was a whole strategy of tension like done in Europe to prevent
Is that what
communists.
NATO's doing right now? Is NATO like running around the world looking for fucking communists to kill and what?
No, but it's still doing the same playbook. Just because there's no communists around doesn't mean they're still not doing the same playbook. Like you got to show me the reforms NATO did that says we're not giving weapons to far right militias
Okay.
in countries so that they commit false flags and blame it on
Do you think
on the opposition.
just a really
And
quick
whatnot.
question then? Do you think the let's say we'll go by the entire like orthodox Marxist perspective here. Do you think the Eastern European proletariat would like or dislike being invaded by Russia?
I don't think anybody would like to get invaded by anybody.
Yeah, so that's why like it's just interesting how the country that wasn't in NATO was the one that had to worry about getting invaded by Russia, right? Pretty sure you ask any
Wait,
of the
which
proletariat of the
country?
Baltic states, like I think they're pretty happy being in NATO right now, you know, because Russia's not fucking with them. Yeah.
Do not get me started on these Baltic states. All of them are pretty much run by Nazi collaborators or like the believers. The fact that you have in Lithuania, you have monuments to Nazi collaborators should tell you that you should probably not listen to the Baltic
Well,
states.
you're just describing all of European history. We have monuments to Nazi collaborators in the UK, but Edward VIII has statues and he was a Nazi collaborator. Like what? Okay.
But
We have
that
fucking
you're
David
not
Lloyd
making
George statues and he's a national
bro. You're not
hero and he
making
was
this
like pro
argument
Nazi.
good
So
for you. You're just making UK seem even shittier than it already is. We
yeah,
know
but
UK is shit.
okay,
I'm just
but
saying.
what's your
If
point though?
you
What's those like? You're
if
moving away
you
from the question. You're just saying like, oh, these people have like a problematic history with Nazis and shit. Well, okay, but I'm pretty sure their working class is happier in NATO knowing they're not going to get invaded by Russia, right?
I don't know
I don't
if
know why
they're
you have to view it in
happy or
these
not.
absolute terms. Like, just because NATO does
Also,
some bad things around the world doesn't
Also,
mean that they don't have a use for some
the
country.
only
Like,
reason Russia
what?
would invade you is because you're trying to join NATO. So if you don't want to join NATO, if you don't want to get invaded by Russia, stay neutral.
Really? So, given that Zelensky took NATO off the table in the first 2 weeks of the invasion, why didn't the invasion stop?
Dude, are you serious?
What? Why?
Oh my God. Dude, if Zelensky didn't want to get invaded, he should have signed the Minsk Accords when he was in office. You mean the thing he ran on in at first? Dude had a 28% approval rating before he got invaded by Russia because he couldn't sign the Minsk Accords, and because the nationalists in Ukraine kept breaking the ceasefire by bombing Donbass.
Wait.
Like you could
No,
look
you're
prior to
completely off here. The Minsk,
no,
wait, the
prior
Minsk
to
Accords
the
were broken by
invasion, you
both
could look.
parties several times. Okay, you don't need to do this.
No. Why? It's not important to just look at it from like a rational self-interest. Why would Putin try to provoke a war in Ukraine? Russia's poor shit. It doesn't need another. It doesn't need to annex more territories so that it's forced to administer
Well, I don't
them.
know. Why did they?
It
Why did
doesn't.
they try to? Why did they leave that dispute over the Tuzla Island in 2003 when there was no prospect of NATO floating around for Ukraine? Why did they? Why was it shown that there were plans to annex Crimea as early as 2010 when Ukraine wasn't talking about NATO? Like when they had fucking Yanukovych about to come in. So what are you talking about? Like
Crimea, okay. Also, Crimea is a special case because that's not even Ukrainian territory.
according
That
to
was part of,
what? Right? Like
according to history, brother.
what do you mean according
That's
to history?
you're a socialist. You're a socialist.
Uh,
You're supposed to look at historical developments to inform your opinions and your analysis.
okay, so
If you
what
look
makes
at
Crimea Russian then?
because it won it in the Crimean War or something. I forget when it got Crimea specifically,
So you
but
win a
it got it
territory in
from
a war,
Turkey.
and then that makes it yours, right? Like imperialism makes a country yours.
Unfortunately, sometimes that's the case.
Okay,
Also,
so when Khrushchev
it was an
transferred Crimea to
first of all,
Ukraine, doesn't that make it Ukraine's?
no,
Why not?
because the population there is still Russian.
Why is the population mostly Russian?
Unfortunately, the Russian Empire cleansed it of the Tatars.
So you get a right to a territory because you carried out an ethnic cleansing 50, 60 years ago.
I mean, if you
The fact that
want,
we did
if
imperialism in the past means we get to do more in the
okay,
future.
well, you're not even arguing for Ukraine to have Crimea. You're actually arguing for Turkey to have Crimea or the Tartars to have an independent Crimean Khanate.
No,
So,
no. I'm arguing for a very simple concept that almost every border around the world is built on blood and like disaster, right? The point is that if you try to unwind history and rearrange those borders, the outcome is basically always worse. So the best we can do now is to respect the sovereignty of the borders as they exist and do what we can with them. That's my position.
that is a bullshit. That is a bullshit position because I
Yeah?
know you wouldn't. So Palestinians don't have the right to Israel.
Well, Palestine's being occupied right now, so like the
Well,
Palestinian territories are being
so what?
occupied, and I would argue for
So
those
what?
borders to be reshaped according to like.
All borders are created from bloodshed. That's just the
Mhm.
newest version of the bloodshed. So that's not even a consistent take. This is
Because
why it's important to look at history.
trying to rearrange borders seems to create more bloodshed, like it did in Crimea. Like the annexation of Crimea has.
Okay, but you're just saying I'd rather have the status quo rather than have justice.
I'm not
or-
completely like if you wanted to have like a referendum or some kind of like organic transfer
mean,
of
they
Crimea
did have
to
a
Russia. Well,
referendum.
they had like a referendum that was held by a military. Okay, come on, like an occupying
Okay,
military.
okay, you know what? So what? It's you're never going to believe Russian elections, neither am I, but they did have a referendum.
Well, no, come on. Like if you I'll believe an
And you
election
can
if
look
it's
at-
held fairly according to like someone, not when
Oh,
when you
come on.
just roll tanks in
None of us here
and then
will
hold a
ever
referendum at
believe
gunpoint.
Russia. Okay, come on. We know how corrupt Russia is, and we've been eating American propaganda for so long. None of us would believe if
You
Russia
don't think
had a
it would
fair
have
election
okay, you
or
don't
not.
think it would have been a little bit more convincing if that referendum was held before Russia sent its military in?
The only reason first of all, the only reason they wanted to it was forced to annex Crimea. I don't think even wanted Crimea because
They didn't even want Crimea, even though they
it's
were already
expensive to
trying.
admit.
Even though they were
It's
already trying with
expensive to-
Tuzla Island since 2003, yeah, they didn't want Crimea.
They had a port there already for their navy, and so that means they got a free port there, and they didn't have to upkeep the population and any of the infrastructure there. So, why would you
You're
want?
not going to
why
try
would-
to tell me that Russia had to annex Crimea because they had some boats there. Come on.
Yeah, it had
This is
to
a
annex
very
Crimea
the guy who's
because it felt-
anti-NATO is going to say that we could annex this place because we have a port there. Come on.
No,
Fuck me.
it had to annex Crimea because of its geopolitical self-interest, and and Russia's hand was forced by NATO to annex it after the Euromaidan.
So there's a real like lack of agency going on here on part of the Russians. I don't care whether or not you think they were forced to do it. We're talking about whether it was a good or bad thing.
I mean,
okay?
I think we both agree that material conditions determine what kind of
Yeah, but every
agency
time someone like
have.
you says material conditions, it just seems like a cop out. Like I don't know why you
It's
can't
not
just
a
say
cop out. I mean, I don't really believe that people have the agency that
so we're all
liberals
just
believe.
slaves to material conditions, right? Like
No,
we're programmed.
we're not slaves to material conditions. It's that the choices we are given are determined by our material conditions. Sometimes you make a good choice given the choices you have. Sometimes you make a bad choice.
Okay, let's say then that I guess this kind of like perverted invisible hand of material conditions forced Russia to invade Crimea. I'm still allowed to say that it shouldn't have been annexed,
First of all,
right?
it didn't invade because there wasn't an actual war. I mean, like everybody, most of the people there prefer Russia to Ukraine. I'm sorry,
Well,
that's just the thing.
we don't
If it was an
necessarily.
invasion, there would have been gunfights.
Okay.
Were there any gunfights?
We don't necessarily know that because, well, okay, let's okay, never
No,
mind.
yes,
Let's
we
just
do.
let's
Come
just
on,
say okay, let's just give you that.
it was
Okay.
pretty peaceful, I gotta say, for an
I
invasion.
don't really know if the Tatars right now would say that this was a peaceful process, but
I feel bad for the Tartars, but under any regime, they
no,
probably
not under
don't have.
any. The human rights issues endured by Tatars was vastly exacerbated after the Russians went in. Do you disagree with that? Do you think they were like equally as bad off under the Ukrainians?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they
How
were.
many Tatars were held
Historically
as
speaking,
how many Tatar political prisoners were there before 2014 in Crimea?
oh my God. Of course, there's going to be political
How many of
prisoners
them were
after an annexation.
how many of them were tortured and assassinated by paramilitaries before 2014?
How many? Tell me,
Before
because
2014, I can't find any before 2014, but I can find quite a few afterwards.
I actually don't know what happened to the Tartars afterwards because everybody's assumption is it was shed afterwards. Do you think they had language rights
If you
in
don't
Ukraine?
know, if you well,
Do you
yeah,
think they had
because
the same language rights
the
in
Tatars
Ukraine and
were
Russia?
the Tatars were exempt from the language laws, so yeah. But you're telling me that
Oh,
you don't
wait.
know what happened to the Tatars after the annexation. Why did you say they had it just as bad under Ukraine? Were you just guessing or what?
Oh yeah, because non-Slavic people in Ukraine and Russia are very discriminated against.
Okay, we're
Like
talking about the
Armenians.
difference. We're talking about the
Are,
difference between systemic racism, okay, which I agree. I'm
okay,
sure that
first
does
of all,
exist.
this
We're
isn't
talking about the
technically
difference.
racism. This
We're
is
talking
ethnic
about the
differences.
difference.
This is
But we're talking
Tartars
about
are white.
we're talking
Essentially.
okay, but I'm using it in a broader sense. Okay, you know what I mean when I say systemic racism. Okay,
No, I just have
you're
a problem
unironically
when
doing
people start.
Islam's not a race. How can it be racist? Come
No,
on,
no. My
like.
problem is I have a problem when people try to take American race relations and insert it onto other countries.
Do you think okay?
That's my problem.
I'm just gonna assume you know that racism isn't exclusive to America. Anyway,
No, it's not that racism isn't exclusive
I'm
to
sorry.
America.
Was I about to like finish it? Was I about to finish a sentence like 3 minutes
The
ago that you
race
just keep cutting me
relations
off?
in America are specific to America.
Can you remember what
And
point I was halfway through when you started talking about America?
you're going to tell me you're going to tell me the systematic discrimination the Tartars faced
Yeah,
under Russian rule.
because systemic discrimination is not quite the same level as extrajudicial executions and arbitrary detentions and banning Tatar groups, which were not banned under the Ukrainian government. Yeah, I think there's a few significant differences here.
Banned though, and their ideology and
Oh
political
yeah, the ones that
leanings?
were like the Russians called terrorists, but no one else seemed to recognize that.
No,
Yeah.
but okay, they called them terrorists, but why did they call them terrorists? What was their ideological leanings? What were they? What was their um? What was the point of those groups essentially? What were they doing?
The point of
Who
those
was
groups
funding
was
them?
that they were opposed
You're just saying that.
to the Russian
Okay,
occupation, to the Russian annexation of Crimea.
okay,
They
fine.
boycotted the
They were
election.
okay. So how I guess this is my problem with like talking with
Liberals.
people from the West, yeah, liberals, because I think they believe they believe in democracy too much, in liberal democracy too much. When if you look at Ukraine, you think that's a liberal democracy right now?
Well, in the middle of an invasion, like compared to
No,
what?
before the
exactly?
invasion. Before the invasion.
Compared
You
to
think that's
what? Compared to
a
Russia,
liberal
yeah.
democracy?
Compared to
No,
Russia, I'd say
no,
it's not
On
too
its
bad,
own,
right?
on its own. Do you think it's a liberal democracy? We know Russia is not a liberal democracy.
Okay.
1 second. I got a message from 1 second. Yeah, what's up? Yeah.
Hmm.
If you're okay, first of all, you're focusing on Tartars and using them as a scapegoat for look at what Russia, how bad Russia is. No shit, Russia is bad. We're both on the same page. I'm not here to defend Russia. I understand this is a nationalist war. I don't really have I don't know, I don't really have skin in the game other than like the family that
Mhm.
lives, my family that lives in Eastern Europe. All I'm saying is, if Crimea was violently annexed by Russia, there would have been an actual war, like between the Donbass regions and the Lugansk and the Donetsk republics and the rest of Ukraine. There wasn't the same kind of violent uprising. So, of course, there's going to be some people who are against it. No shit. But you haven't given me you haven't showed me how you haven't showed me that there was violent resistance in Crimea that could show that Russia didn't that being annexed by Russia wasn't popular, that it was very controversial. Like,
No, I'm giving you.
I could show you how joining NATO and EU is controversial in Ukraine because there are separatist regions in Ukraine who are against that.
Was
But you
there
can't show me in Crimea where there are holdouts for Ukraine.
was there violent resistance against the Anschluss?
No, that's because they were German,
Does that
dude.
mean it was okay?
The act I I don't really have an opinion on it. Don't care for nationalism,
Do you think
and I think all of that is kind of bullshit.
do you think
I
your opinion on it might be a bit more swayed against when you consider that there were like hundreds of thousands of Jews living in Austria at the time? I can simplify my position really easily for you if you
No,
want,
you
right?
can't, because you're only comparing it to Nazis because that's the only history you know. And
Okay,
first of all,
I
the
can give you.
Anschluss was overwhelmingly popular in Austria. Do you know why?
Bro,
Like, if you
please, okay,
type in
please.
Anschluss
I'm just
in
asking.
Google,
I'm
the
gonna ask you a
first
really
image
simple
you'll
question.
see is
Okay, I'm gonna ask you a really simple question. Okay, let's say that's true. Okay, let's assume then tomorrow, Tatars are what 12%. They were 12%. There's less of them now in Crimea, but they were 12% of the population, right? About the same as black people in America, right? 13, 14%.
Mhm.
Let's say 87% of Americans vote to jail all the black people. Should they be allowed to do it?
No, because
Why? It's very
I believe
popular.
in minority rights.
Yeah, and the Tatar minority rights were
I'm not saying
compromised by the
the
annexation of Crimea.
okay. First of all, if we go back to your Anschluss analogy, the
Same
problem
story.
that Anschluss wasn't the Anschluss. The problem was the fact that it was headed by Hitler. There was a movement since the 19th century to unite the German lands under Austria or under Prussia. It was either like I forget what the I mean it eventually it was Germany was united under Prussia in exclusion of Austria,
Hmm.
but there was a whole movement of Austria of the German lands being united under Austria. It was like it was called like Gross Germany or something, Big Germany or whatever. So like again, you're you're using you're a socialist, but you're using like very nationalistic examples.
Why
The
is that
problem
not?
with
The
Hitler,
protection
the
of
problem with
minority rights
Hitler
is
is
not
because
a nationalistic perspective.
no, the problem with the annexation of Austria was the fact that it was that Germany was ruled under the National Socialist, what was it, National Socialist Workers Party, the
Hmm.
NSDAP or whatever,
Hmm.
the Nazi party. That's the problem. If Weimar Republic wanted to Anschluss Austria, do you think that would be better?
Well, my point is
No,
that
no,
if
answer
you,
the question. Do you
I
think if
was I about to
if the
sorry
Weimar
was I about to answer your question
Hey,
and then you interrupt me and told
okay,
me to
go
answer the
ahead.
question?
It
So
was a yes
I
or no
think
question.
if you want to join with another country, I think you can do that by a referendum. Yeah, I think countries have a right to hold referendums. What I don't think they have the right to is to roll tanks in and hold referendums after they've like basically occupied the territory. You see, there's a pretty big difference there. Like,
Dude, if they roll tanks in and
if you're
nobody
so
is shooting at
confident.
those tanks, then bro, if you roll in tanks and nobody's shooting at those tanks, do you, is there any resistance to the occupation?
Well, they're just because you're not shooting at tanks, all right? First of all, and after I think on the day that the Anschluss happened, like tens of thousands of people were arrested, right? So that's one
Yeah,
problem.
of course.
And in
Yeah.
Crimea, there might not have been massive violent resistance, but like haven't tens of thousands of people fled there as well? They fled they fled Crimea because they knew what
Yeah.
was going to happen to them afterwards.
Yeah,
Like
I'm not
if you're
saying that
fleeing your
everybody in
home, like how is that?
Crimea.
That's violence
I'm
of
not
some
saying
sort.
there's 100%. Um, there's 100% acceptance of Russian occupation. I'm saying that by far and large, people in Crimea were okay or agree with annexation of Crimea by Russia.
And
I'm
we
not saying
also
that there
agree
wasn't.
that majorities should not be able to override the human rights of minorities, which they did by allowing
No,
Russia to
they
annex Crimea.
do. No, they didn't because
What part of that was wrong?
okay, did the legal status of Tartars change?
Or what are we going to do? Because it's not systemic, because it's not legally written
Oh
down.
no, because
The
it's not.
what?
Well, that's how things become systemized and institutionalized through laws, through the state.
Well, the fact that they
Do you,
banned the
like
Tatar bodies who boycotted the election, I'd say that that is that's legal action, isn't it?
just because they banned the party doesn't mean it's systemic. Of course, they're going to ban shit. Again, you're assuming that what Russia does is not corrupt or anything. I'm saying that even in spite of how corrupt and undemocratic Russia is, and how undemocratic the annexation of Crimea was, by and large, that was okay for most of the population.
I'm
And
not
sure,
disagree. Okay, but like if I could, if it again, you're coming back to the same thing. If it turned out that jailing all the black people was good for 89% of Americans, we still shouldn't do it, right?
I think that's a bit different than what you're talking
So,
about right
what
now.
level of human rights abuse would the Tatars have to endure for you to say that the annexation of Crimea shouldn't have happened?
I don't know. I'm pretty sure if Russia went in there violently, it would. Again, these hypotheticals are so stupid because we know what happened.
Well, no, because
We
I'm
see what
like,
happened.
you actually told me that you don't know what the
The
abuses
fucking
are.
navy
So,
in Crimea mutinied and went over to the Russian side. Like again, you're focusing on this is why I don't like about liberals. You're focusing on this little slither, but you're not able to connect it back to the whole big picture. You're
hmm,
just focusing on
are the
them.
Tatars just a little sliver, or what? I
Yes,
mean,
they
they're.
are. Unfortunately, what the Russian Empire did to the Tatars, they're a little slither now.
hmm I mean, if you're owning that, that's fine. If you're saying that the human
I'm
rights
it's
abuses have not
I'm
crossed a
being
reasonable enough
I'm
threshold for you, then that's fine. You can
no,
say it's worth it. That's
I'm not
okay.
even taking a position here. I'm just being descriptive. You have to look at this like from a third person perspective because what you're talking about, like these big picture things with a lot of cascading effects that you don't know what's good or bad right now. Like, okay, let me give you an example of something that may be good in the short term but might be bad in the long term. Let me think of something. Um, shit, can't think of anything off the top of my head. You got anything good? No.
Want me to
Okay,
help you
so
with your
let's.
argument? Okay.
Yeah, no. Give me do you know
It's
any
high
good
pressure,
historical?
I
Because
know.
I know it is high pressure, and I'm trying to use my. I'm trying to use good historical examples.
Okay. About what? What's the question? Like,
Okay, of big picture things that might have been bad at first, but turned out better in the long term.
um,
Okay. Okay, I actually have one controversial one, so I
hmm,
don't but bear with me. In the Soviet Union under Stalin, w- the population was forced to industrialize at such a quick pace that it was extremely violent. They had the famines,
mm-hmm,
and many hundreds of thousands, millions of people died
yeah.
because of the quick industrialization forced by Stalin and the Communist Party.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm
But
sorry.
in the
Can I?
long,
I'm sorry. I'll actually give you a better one that's more optically satisfying for you.
no,
You
no,
could
no, no.
say
I
that
want
the.
to stick with this one because
Okay,
it's
go on.
not optically good.
Okay.
It's not optically good,
Right.
but it gives a lot. It's more. It gives you more to think about.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so under this industrial policy of millions of people died, but the reason it was done and the reason Stalin did was of the upcoming Nazi invasion by Hitler. If they didn't build up their industrial capacity, the Nazis would have just rolled right through the Soviet Union.
Hmm.
So, do you think in the long term, all the industrial policy by Stalin might have been somewhat of a good thing if it prevented Nazis from genociding Slavs?
I'm not sure about I mean, like, even in the Russian Civil War, didn't like 20 different armies try to come and take control of Russia and they still failed before the country industrialized? So I don't know. But you can make the
No, no,
argument that you can make the
that
argument
was
for you can make that argument for industrialization anywhere, right? Like
no,
industrialization in
no,
the
no, no.
UK led to like life expectancies plummeting. Like they were lower
Yeah,
after the Industrial Revolution. But then you could say long term, the Industrial Revolution probably yielded a lot of benefits for everyone. You could say the same thing about, I mean, I think Karl Marx made the same argument about the British in India, right? He said that although it was really brutal and all that, it was still like long term, it established an economy in India that was able to sustain. I don't know. Like you can make, yeah, you can make that argument. But I think at the time that whatever was happening in India or in the UK or in Russia, the abuse side of it can still be critiqued, right? And that's why I would say
yeah.
with Crimea, I'm struggling to see exactly what long term gain is coming from Russia annexing the territory, especially since it's never going to get recognized internationally.
The the long term gain is for Russia mostly, and it's for having access to the Black Sea, which well, actually, thanks to Zelensky, it might landlock Ukraine and have all the access to the Black Sea based on how the war is going right now. But we'll see at the peace treaty.
Even though, so Russia gets access to the Black Sea, right? But that's isn't that just a justification for imperialism then?
It's great power politics. That's how it is.
Okay, well, if we're doing okay,
If you're against great power politics, there are fundamental changes that you have to make to the whole world economic system.
no, no, let's go
And
with great power politics. So, well, if that's the case, then clearly the U.S., the EU, Ukraine themselves don't like that. So, isn't it just in the interest of the great powers of the United States and Europe to make sure that that isn't like a comfortable move for Russia that they
yeah,
suffer for annexing Crimea?
that's why we have this whole war right now. Why you think NATO provoked it? It was so that Russia could fuck itself economically.
Well, then, I'm sorry. Like, if Russia's going to make that bad of a decision because like
Yeah, it
NATO is
was a,
talking to Ukrainians, I don't know. I'm sorry.
no,
Yeah, like whatever.
I personally don't think that was a good decision to invade Ukraine, but
It was a fucking
that
terrible
was
decision. Look what's happening to
that
them.
was.
Sorry.
I mean, actually, the ruble is doing somewhat well. There, in the long, it's actually hard to say whether or not the invasion will turn out good or not because we don't know the full long term effects of those sanctions. Right now, what's happening is that the West is forced to buy gas from Russia, but now in rubles, which is actually bad for America because America's hegemony depends on the petrodollar, and not the petrodollar, but the dollar itself being the world's reserve
Yeah, and
currency.
Russia's lost more men than they lost in the entire Soviet war in Afghanistan that lasted like 9 years. So yeah, go ahead.
Wait, I don't know. Russia only committed like 400,000 troops in Ukraine, did it not? Or am I
Well,
mistaken?
the loss of life of Russian soldiers right now is estimated to be, I think, most estimates are about 15,000. Ukraine's putting up at 30,000, so it's somewhere around there. Like it's the Soviet
Also,
war lost them
The
15,000.
Soviet war is the Soviet Afghanistan war is different than Ukraine. Ukraine has modern NATO training, weapons, everything.
Yeah, but that's the point is
You're not comparing
but we're talking about benefits to Russia, right? And
yeah,
what
yeah.
apparently
I'm saying
one of the costs is that they've lost potentially up to 30,000 lives. So yeah, which
I
is quite a
mean
lot.
in the grand scheme of things, if what happens to the West is they become more isolated from the rest of the world, it might actually be a good thing. But
That
that's why I'm
Russia
saying
becomes more
these.
isolated, or
No, it's not more isolated. It's more isolated from the West, but the world is more willing than ever to trade with Russia. Tell me which
is
other
that
countries
true?
puts who is actually condemning the Russian invasion other than the West and a few of their puppets?
What I think most countries condemned the occupation. Didn't even I
But
mean
well,
even
okay, who
China
sanctioned?
abstained.
I'm sorry. Who sanctioned Russia?
I can give you a list. Hang on. But the condemnation was like what, like 180 countries?
Yeah,
It was
yeah,
quite a lot, right?
I
Fucking
misspoke.
Kenya and shit. Yeah.
No, no, I misspoke. But I'm talking about sanctions. That's what actually
Well,
matters.
a condemnation is surely a bit more valid, right? Because North
No, no, no.
African, no, because
Sanctions
no,
actually
wait,
hurt
wait.
their economy.
Well, okay, so North African countries and like Middle Eastern countries can't really afford to do that because of how dependent they are on bread, right? And the way that the wars damage their economies. Like, of course, they can't sanction Russia, okay, to the same degree that. But yeah, it's like it's EU, United States, and Canada who are
Okay,
imposing the
so
specific sanctions, right?
it's not the whole world against Russia. It's just the
Well, the
West.
condemnation came from the whole world. Come
Oh,
on.
okay, but who cares about condemnation? No shit, you're going to condemn an invasion.
Okay, well, that sounds like opposition. I mean, if a lot of these like North African countries are like not choosing
At
not
the
to
end of the
sanction out of
day,
necessity, right, for their
we're
populations.
talking. At the end of the day, we're talking about actual material, the material reality. It doesn't matter what people say; it matters what they do.
You
And
don't
if
think
they're
it
not
matters
willing
what they
to,
have no choice to do, though?
yeah, it does a little bit. It kind of it helps. We at the very least, we're able to see who's connected to who and how everything is more. Let me put it this way: it makes us in the West see that Russia is actually more important to the world economy than we're led to believe. Like if you look at what like Hillary Clinton and Obama were saying, it's like a bombed out gas station. It's not.
Hmm.
If the whole world economy and like there's a if the if EU is about to like have like horrible inflation problems and gas problems, that means they it's a bit more than a burned out gas station to them, you know? And if the whole world is about to have a food crisis, then Russia is more important than just being a second tier country. If anything, it kind of shows that maybe we should respect Russia's geopolitical interests so that we could prevent food crises and gas crises in the future.
It's hard to, okay, it's hard to say exactly what you mean by respect Russia, though, because that's kind of giving them an excuse to violate the sovereignty of other countries. Like,
Okay.
I don't really know what you're supposed to do when you've got a country invading another country. Like, should you just let them because that's their geopolitical interest, or because like what? What's about like
Yeah.
what kind of
Sometimes
policy are you
invasions
advocating for
happen.
here?
My policy for America is not to stick their nose in where it doesn't belong. This is a local problem in Eastern Europe. I don't know what America has to do with it.
It's kind of not a local problem because I mean, a big part of the Russian propaganda campaign is to blame the United States for everything they don't like about Ukraine. Like whether it was conspiracy
I
theories about
mean,
chemical weapons or about the Maidan, like yeah, they're full of this stuff, right?
what conspiracy theories about Maidan? It was an orchestrated coup by Americans. They even
That's the
picked like
conspiracy
their
theory.
intern.
Yeah.
No, that they even picked their interim government. I think. Like you have leaked phone calls saying that. That's not a
Yeah, but
conspiracy.
the
Me
Newland
calling it a coup is a descriptive term.
okay, the phone call, right? The Newland Piat phone call, yeah?
What's the new Olympia like? Is that the
That's
one
the
with the
phone call
sniper
where
fire?
no, that's a different one. Okay, we'll get to that one as well if you want. The Newland Piat phone call was the one where they said fuck the EU and Yatsenuk is our guy. That one, right? Where you
I,
said they were picking the
I
interim
don't.
government.
Yeah, I think it was that one.
Can
Again,
you
it's been a while. I don't
can you
have
point to
like
me
all
exactly
these.
where in that phone call they're picking an interim government?
Dude, I'm remembering this from memory. I don't
Okay,
have.
okay, it's okay. I remember because I
I'm
read the whole
pretty.
thing. Okay, please, it's okay.
Oh,
So
good
there
for
is
you.
no evidence in that phone call that they are picking an interim
What?
government. There's
Okay.
nothing there.
What source are you using it from?
The transcript of the phone call and the
Let me
audio.
see. Can you show me it?
Okay.
Can I see the transcript or
Yep.
at least the audio?
Let's see. Call.
Because I'm pretty sure that
No, I'll show
this
you.
is
I'll
why I
show you.
hate.
I'll show you why it's a conspiracy theory. Okay, look, this is why this is how it works. All right. So that's the
Oh God,
transcript there.
BBC.
If you Control F Yats YATS,
Is it going to be okay? 1 second.
I'll type in what you can Control F. Yes.
I don't want to control F. I want to
Okay.
see something.
Go for it. Thanks, Maritzi.
Okay, let's look at another source.
You're looking at
Let's look
another
at
source.
Jacobin. Yeah, because
Okay.
you're only okay. So you're showing me a article, a BBC article, which is fine, but you realize this is technically like a primary source, and you can't trust a single primary source. You have to look at multiple sources.
Well, I listened to the audio while reading the transcript, so I mean, if you think there's something different, you can point out to me.
I
where.
mean,
You think the BBC like changed the words of the transcript?
no, I'm saying you might not get the full story. What? And also, I
Huh.
don't feel like reading. I thought the transcript was shorter than this. I remember it being shorter, but I guess it was longer. I guess it's longer.
So what claim are you making against this article?
Again, my claim is that first of all, I use that as one example, and second, my claim is that
Well, that's the only
America,
example, just so you know. Like, that's
America, uh, was instrumental in the far right coup in Ukraine in 2014.
okay, but you're not going to use the phone call as evidence anymore, right? So we have
No,
to
I
try
am
something else.
because
Okay.
I mean, why would America even talk to Ukraine about who's their economic minister or something? Is that what Yats was? Yeah, the
Yatsenuk.
economic.
So Yatsenuk. So what I think you were trying to tell me, because this is what people say about it, was that they picked Yatsenuk to become the new prime minister. Is that more? That's like the claim that people make. I don't know if I'm mischaracterizing you or what.
I don't. The last time I looked at this was in like 2020.
Okay.
So my memory is a little bit shaky on the exact details.
Well, we don't
Sorry
have to.
if
You don't
I
have to.
don't have like notes in front of me.
Yeah.
For
You don't.
this.
You don't have to commit to anything. It's okay. I'll just tell you what I think happened,
I'm
and
not,
then.
I am committing that this was a far right U.S. back coup.
Okay, we can
That's
get to
what it
that though.
was.
We can get to that, but like this point here, this is after the coup has happened, and she's saying Yats is the guy who's got the economic experience, right? And people say, maybe you're not saying this, but people say that this is evidence of US diplomats picking who's going to be the leader of the prime minister of Ukraine, right?
Whereas why would a U.S. diplomat even talk about this? This is internal affairs of a country.
Because we all know that the United States has some interest in Ukraine, but we're trying to take the difference between having some interest and extending it to they were picking the new government and orchestrating a coup. All right, so you can have U.S. has interest in lots of countries. Okay, like the U.S. has interest in like specifically even like Baltic states and shit like that. So, but the point people are trying to make is that the U.S. was picking the new government, whereas I would say she's just expressing a preference for Yatsenuk because like Yatsenuk was the leader of the opposition. He was second in line after Yanukovych. Like he was the favorite to win if Yanukovych left the country. So that's why I see like people take this phone call of she's like endorsing Yatsenuk, where it's like, well, okay, but Yatsenuk was the leader of the opposition. He was going to win. So that's why I call it conspiracy theory, because it's just taking a pretty benign conversation and turning it into like.
It's not a benign conversation.
What's not benign about it?
It's America talking about internal affairs of a country. Like
yeah, you can.
if Russia was talking about the internal affairs of Montenegro
Okay.
right now,
Hmm.
you would be America would be invading.
Yeah,
Right?
so so you know how like Corbyn had an election campaign against Boris Johnson in 2019 in the UK, right? And Trump,
Yeah.
the president of the United States, went up there and said, Boris is great, great future for Britain. Corbyn, he would be a disaster. That's a president of the United States talking about the internal affairs of another country. That is not evidence of the US president picking the new prime minister, is it?
First of all, that's a bit different of somebody publicly stating something and something in a private phone call.
Okay, so if
between,
Trump privately called a UK person saying, "Yeah, I like Boris, I don't like Corbyn," you think that's evidence of him doing like what?
I would think that's a pretty slimy thing to do, and it would just be more evidence of America meddling in other countries' affairs, like
If
this phone
Trump
call
has a
is.
phone call with someone saying, "I like this candidate, not this one," that's like
It depends who the phone call is, but again, we're talking about a period in Ukraine where there is a power vacuum. It's a bit different than just Trump saying something out loud. And also, Trump Trump isn't a serious person. Like I don't care what he says. Most of the time he's most of the shit he says, he doesn't even know what he's saying. Like
okay. Can we just say, can I just ask you a hypothetical though? Let's just say an imaginary
okay.
president who was very serious was calling,
hmm
was on a phone call to like some conservative politician, and they're like, you know what, I really like your candidate. I really hope that other guy doesn't win. Is that like him like
Yeah, I
meddling in the
think
election?
that would raise a lot of red flags for me. I would be like, "Huh, I wonder what the United States is planning, or
Okay.
what are they trying? Why are they interested in this
But
election
you, okay,
specifically?"
let's say, okay, let
There
me
is
just,
that's actually
okay, I'm just
it is
humoring you
somewhat.
then. Okay, I'm humoring you then. So I'm just going to say, wouldn't you need a bit more evidence to show that he was
No,
orchestrating?
yeah, you do need a bit more evidence. I was
Okay.
giving you an example from memory. I'm trying to remember more stuff
Yeah, is
for
there,
this.
if there's anything else, we can talk about the
I
sniper
yeah,
phone call as well if you want.
no, I the sniper is actually the sniper thing is a genuine conspiracy theory because you don't because we would never know what the actual what actually happened because you have both sides with
Mm,
evidence on both sides. It's more about whether or not you believe that that sniper was pro Maidan or anti Maidan. And
mhm.
yeah, I personally don't know what it was. It's one of those things you just never know. It's like all the shit that happened during the years of lead in Italy. We have some idea what happened there, but we truly don't know what exactly transpired during all those years.
So if it's neither of the phone calls, why are you calling it a US led far right coup?
Because they seem to be pretty pro US right afterwards.
Well,
And
they were also
and
like pro
Ukraine took
West
out IMF.
beforehand.
No, no. And Ukraine took out IMF loans after the coup.
Okay, but they were in favor of that beforehand. The public was in favor of that
The
beforehand.
public was in favor of IMF loans.
Well, it's implied with the EU deal, isn't it? I'm pretty sure they went in
No,
together.
how no. I'm maybe I'm mistaken this, but if the EU deal wait, so you're saying we should follow the Ukrainian public's opinion on joining the EU even though would they want to become a puppet of America through IMF loans?
Wait,
Maybe these people just don't know
no,
what's
no, no,
best
no,
for
no,
them.
no,
That's
no.
sometimes
Well,
the case.
okay, but I,
I
I
mean,
mean,
it's an IMF
that's
loan.
okay. So
you're a
wait,
socialist.
wait,
You
wait,
know
wait,
what
wait,
exactly this
wait,
entails. Do you
wait. I thought,
disagree what
well, no,
IMF loans are?
I'm a liberal now. I've flipped. Okay, but I'm just saying, when you're forced to choose between one or the other, that's what I'm saying. You're forced to choose between one or the other. You choose the more popular one. Yeah.
No, I think you gotta choose. Well, it depends on who the. Again, this is why it's important to have a framework and ideology. This is why Yanukovych was an opportunist. He just chose whatever was best for him in that moment
I
in
mean, he
time.
was pretty
Not
consistently pro-Russia and clearly,
no, he
clearly,
was.
clearly backing.
From this Jacobin article, it seems like Yanukovych was trying to toe a line for a while. So I don't even. But
Well,
again,
he
this
was
is just
trying to
one source.
toe.
No,
So
but this is just one source saying that Yanukovych was just
yeah,
was
he was
towing the
trying.
line.
He was towing a line because the EU option was more popular. So from my research, right? Yanukovych gave a speech on Ukrainian Independence Day where he spoke about Ukraine becoming a more European state, right? Which makes you think he's towing the line. But then in the same speech, he said he wanted to deepen ties with Russia. So he's hedging his bets. But that's because his behavior from getting elected all the way into getting ousted was pretty pro-Russian. Like, and I'm just curious, you're talking about these people don't know what's best for them. Well, which
I mean,
country,
if you're
which
pro
member state?
IMF loans,
Well, which member? I'm just wondering then, because if the alternative was the Eurasian Customs Union, which of the Eurasian Customs Union members is like a success story then? If we're
I
talking
mean,
long
none of them,
term.
none of them are, because that whole region is kneecapped, and it's been kneecapped for since the 90s. It's going to take generations for that region to come back to like pre-Soviet levels.
Well, even then
Mm.
though, like compared to say like the Baltic states or Poland or Hungary, like Belarus and Armenia are like way behind, and that's why I think
Also,
the
I don't
incentive would
know
be
if
to lean
Poland
towards
and
the West.
Hungary are good examples. Again, these are far right countries.
Wait,
I don't
wait,
know
we're
how
just
these are good
okay.
examples.
I'm talking about economically, right? Though, because we're talking about
Okay,
economic deals. Okay, I know they're far
okay,
right. I know they're, but Belarus is pretty far right as well. All right, so I don't know.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Again, this if we go back to the 90s. Okay, point is also Lithuania, Latvia. Those are like have declining populations, and a lot. What percentage of their economy is based on remittance from workers abroad?
I don't know, but I'm looking at a graph of their GDP per capita recently. It's the Lithuania. Okay, that's pretty big bump in 2015. I don't know why, but I'm just thinking of comparisons though, right? Like
Yeah, but you're
Latvia,
comparing
it's pretty steady. Let's see what
okay,
Belarus.
GDP per capita. Where is that money coming from? What's there?
Well, where the and then Belarus has a nice big dip in 2014, and then coming back up and then dipping in 2020. I'm talking about just like if again, Ukraine is not in a position to just go its own way and build a fucking like whatever, like a socialist utopia. Like they have to,
No, I'm
and
not
not that the
talking about
public wanted
socialist
that anyway,
utopia.
right? Yeah.
Again, we're talking about just geopolitics. We're not talking about socialist utopias. We're not talking about revolutionary workers. We're talking about if you want to be an independent country,
Mhm.
have your own sovereignty in the 21st century, you have to have something that makes you important to the global economy, and one of them by far is in industry, because
S-
you can't just invade a country and take you could invade a country and take their resources, but
mhm.
going in a country and taking over their industry is a little bit harder. Wouldn't you agree? I mean, one of the reasons why Germany is pretty much the ruler of EU, or like the de facto uh, leader of the EU, is because of their manufacturing base.
Yeah, and the way that the euro kind of like saps the export markets of poorer countries like Greece and Italy and Spain, Portugal. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. I know that. I'm just
yeah. My only recommendation for Ukraine and its people would be if I mean it's impossible for them because it was a very corrupt country before the invasion, probably
mhm.
worse now, and it was kind of stuck in a shitty position, and that sucks. But joining the EU would have not made joining the EU would not make them better off.
Well, compared to joining, maybe if I agree with you, and it didn't seem to have. It's hard to say because there was a civil war like right after they
Yeah.
joined the customs. I mean, they're not in the EU yet, right? They're only in the customs agreement, right?
Also,
So
I know this is a big pivot,
go for it.
but my biggest question to you, I now remember, I was going through your video.
Oh,
You said that other
Wait,
European
law?
countries have
What are you,
Nazi
a fucking
battalions. That's not
liberal?
true. Which European country officially integrated their Nazi
no, I
militias
didn't.
into their army?
I didn't say they had Nazi battalions. The point was about the whole like that. Oh fuck, he was doing that. He was doing that dumb fuck analogy of like if you're at a table with 10 people and there's two people, then it's a 10-person Nazi table. Like it was that
No, no,
bullshit
no.
thing.
He's right.
And
I
then I
mean,
was
the arm.
saying like,
I mean,
well, I
okay,
mean, we have
go
like
ahead.
Hungary where Jobbik gets 20% of the vote, or like Greece where the third largest party was Golden Dawn. It's like, especially the military, right? Like, I'm pretty sure Nazis in general have a kind of like, have a kind of proclivity, like whatever the word is, like a predisposition to want to join the
Yeah,
military.
yeah.
Yeah.
Military and police. Yeah, I completely agree with you. That's why it makes it so much worse when the government officially recognizes a Nazi battalion and
Well,
integrates it into their army.
but what
So
they
you have this
also
far
did
right
was that
group.
but
You
they,
have this. No, let me finish. You have
okay.
this. Me and you agree that military police, they tend to be pretty right leaning.
Mhm.
So when you're like you and you just implied, because I'm assuming you're going to say that Swoboda never had much of a uh many seats in the Rada, the Ukrainian parliament, and
Yeah.
that shows that uh nationalism isn't that popular in Ukraine, but their liberal government integrated the Nazi battalion into their military. Like, what other European country does that, or what other country has done that?
Um, countries that are being invaded or are stuck in a civil
No, it
war.
wasn't. It wasn't.
Yeah.
Bro, you're supporting an ultra nationalist country. Then you know that, right? Like, if you're integrating Nazi battalions, that's
Yeah, I
so
mean,
weird.
you know why we started Second World War, why World War II was started, right?
Well, there that one is a little bit more controversial.
Well, why did
Again,
we
if you're
why
a
did we declare
leftist,
war, right?
well, by we, aren't you British?
Yeah.
Okay, so wouldn't your reason for declaration of war be slightly different than America's?
Oh yeah, it's different from America, sure, yeah.
Okay, so
But the war started like, yeah, after what?
in Britain, it was more of Germany, uh, Germany. Well, for both Britain, to me, oversimplify it, America and Britain saw Germany as a threat to their imperial interests.
Well, I'm more asking about a specific event.
You're talking about Pearl Harbor. Oh God,
No, no, for the
that's like
UK,
arch
for the UK.
for the I forget exactly why
It was
UK
when Germany
started the war.
invaded Poland,
Oh right.
right?
Oh, you're talking about. Oh, that's just
And
because of alliances, though.
yeah, well, Poland was run by a fascist government when they were invaded.
Yeah, yeah, I
And
know.
you know where those
They
fascists
actually
went
stopped.
after the
They
Nazis invaded?
I actually don't know. I'm pretty sure the
They went to
Soviets
okay.
massacred their officer class for being nationalists,
Well,
and
they were
also
sent into they were a lot of them were sent into exile, and they came to the UK. They were stationed up in Scotland. Like the Polish fascists in exile, like military men, were taken into Scotland and basically
that
like
says more
made to
about the
man the
UK.
yeah, and
Okay,
they were
says
basically
more
made
about the UK than you
to
think
man the
it does.
beaches. So like I mean I can go like an hour up the road and find like the forts where the Polish fascist soldiers stood just in case Hitler wanted to attack from fucking Norway. Yeah, it's not like I mean okay, it's really shit to bring fucking like Nazis into your military and all that, but it's like war is pretty messy and you know the UK didn't
Okay,
collapse into a Polish
okay.
fascist regime afterwards, so
No, no, wait. Well, first of all, um, okay, this is good. Let me. Okay, so this is what happens when you're looking at this without some sort of a framework or an ideology. You're just looking at this as like these discrete events. Okay, so what does that say about the liberal governments of UK and America if they're okay with working with fascists? What happens, what does it say about the UK when it collaborated with the puppet fascist government to kill all the communists in
I
Greece?
think it's just great power theory, you know. That's what great powers do. They want to win
No.
wars, so they side with
Okay,
fucking
but
crazy people.
can you
Russia did
show
this as
me
well.
a
Russia had a
no,
non-aggression
no.
pact with Germany in the Second
No,
World
that
War.
a non-aggression pact is a little bit different than collaborating with fascist paramilitaries to take down a
So I
government,
guess you're not
like in
swayed by the
Greece.
fact that Russia has fascist paramilitaries like the Wagner Group and There's quite a few
That's a
other ones as
private
well.
military group. My problem with Ukraine is that we're funding those fascist groups. That's my problem.
Didn't we cut the Azov battalion off from our
Oh my
funds?
God, it's going to be, you're going to show me a law that says we cut them off. You know, it's bullshit. Ukraine is the most corrupt country in the world. You think now all those weapons didn't go to fascists? You think the CIA and the Canadian intelligence service just stopped training all those fascists?
Well, I don't know. Okay, like I don't know if you want to find like some dug up documents that show that they were, but in any case,
This
like
thing is
we're talking
classified.
about a
You
battalion
won't
of
really
like.
know what happened until like 20 years after the conflict.
Well, no, you keep saying
This
that
is one of
because
the hard
no,
because
no, because
you got to take a historical approach to this to
no,
like see
I
it.
know what your historical approach is. I know your historical approach is look at all the times when we funded fascist paramilitaries to overthrow socialist governments, like in Chile or El Salvador or Iran. Like that's what you're going to say, right? And therefore we're funding paramilitaries now. Therefore, same idea, right? That's the
No,
history context that you're giving me, right?
yeah, because over time, America and NATO developed these methods for bringing down unfavorable governments around the world.
Mhm.
This is what they learned over the history of over the course of the Cold War of who to fund, who's the most likely to go out and shoot people, who's the most likely to agree to do some fucked up shit like torturing people. They found out they were able to perfect that craft over the course of the Cold War, and we're just seeing that we're still seeing the effects of that even after the Cold War. Like, why does America fund theocrats in the Middle East? They're not. You wouldn't call those are fascists, right? Or like they're far right, but they're
Mhm.
not like the fascists in Ukraine. They're a different far right group,
Mhm.
right? So why does like America and Ukraine and UK are able to work with these groups so well over the course of what 80 years now?
Well, as far as I know, when it comes to Ukraine, America started helping the Ukrainian National Guard because there was a civil war happening. Like, I think these are like I know that.
You're also missing a point. You're missing a little factoid there.
Hmm.
The only people that would fight in that civil war were like the Azov, the Adar, the Right Sector, Tornado Battalion, or the C-14. God, there's like I think there's like 50 battalions. Supposedly there's like 50 different Nazi battalions in Ukraine that are active,
50.
but who, supposedly
I mean,
that's what I've heard.
this is when we get to the point where you actually have to like find a huge military photograph and put like a little
I
magnifying glass
mean,
over it to find the one swastika tattoo. Like, yeah, I mean, again,
okay,
you can
okay,
say,
but
but
like
like,
if you, dude, that doesn't help your argument. Why is there a swastika tattoo in the middle of your fight for freedom?
like because we're
And
talking about
also, it
every
doesn't.
military. Like, again, like what? So what's your like? What kind of are you saying that
I'm
we
pretty sure
shouldn't?
there's.
So like how many Nazis need to be out of the Ukrainian army before we can help them against an invasion? Like what's your threshold here? Do you think it'd be okay to give arms to Ukraine against a Russian invasion if there were no
I
Nazis in the
think.
army?
I think it's none of our business what happened
Okay,
there,
so you don't care that
unless you
there are
have.
Nazis in the army. Like this is not changing your
Yes, I do.
argument.
I do care because I'm funding those Nazis.
Where wait, do you know what the Azov battalion have been doing for the last month?
I don't know, rebranding.
They've been
And
fighting in
also you're
bro. They've been
also and
don't no no
they're
no
not
no.
only in Azov. They're also in Kharkiv. There are different but what are they called? Brigades? I don't know a lot of
They were mostly concentrated in Mariupol because that's near the Azov Sea, you know, Azov battalion, and they were in
yeah,
Azovstal in the
that was
steelworks
their
plant.
headquarters.
Like,
That was their
yeah,
headquarters to put
that's
down the original
so
uprising
they were in the
after the language
they
laws.
were in the city that was getting flattened by like that's just basically like
But
every building is
also, you're
destroyed.
focusing on Azov again. I think I've seen more right sector patches from all those Ukrainian photos by mainstream media than Azov patches.
So we're just like,
Let's
but
say that.
we're just like hand counting now. I don't think
I'm
having
not hand counting. I'm saying it's you should seriously critically consider what your government represents when they historically and are now only funding crazy theocrats, crazy fascists. In the
But you
past, there
see
was
the
also crazy monarchists
but you see the
in
difference here is
Europe.
like if I wanted to compare this, let's just say one example. If I wanted to compare this to say like Chile or even Iran, right? The difference is that the funding that we gave to Pinochet's army or to the Shah's forces in Iran were deliberately to get rid of democratically elected legitimate governments. As in, we were like, okay, these far right people want to get rid of a legitimate government, we will fund them. This is not the same as what's happening in Ukraine.
No, it actually is. Instead of the democratic legitimate government, they're trying to get rid of. They're trying to create a government that's pro NATO and pro US versus
Well,
either
Ukraine already
neutral
has
or pro
Ukraine
Russia.
already has a pro US, like a pro Western government, right?
I mean, it's not really a. Again, it's in the middle of a civil war, so that's yet to be. It was in the middle of a civil
Well,
war, so
they've had a
it was
pro
up in
Western
the air.
government since 2014.
They had a, yeah, they did because of the coup.
And
But I guess you
wait,
don't agree with that one.
wait, are you saying that this coup was like a Pinochet-esque coup as well? Like we funded far right people to bring down Yanukovych?
No, we weren't. We were funding the far right, I believe, a bit later on.
Yeah,
The
it was
initial,
after
the
the coup,
initial
right? That's kind of
protests,
important. Yeah.
the initial protests were funded by NED, by National Dharma, by Democracy. That was some of
Is this the this is the 5 billion figure, isn't it?
the. You gonna tell me that NED is not a CIA op or something like that, or like actually it's more independent nowadays from what I've heard,
Mm-hmm.
but it's still a CIA cutout. I mean, the guy, one of the founders said that NED is doing what the CIA used to do covertly.
So, like, I read that. That was like an opinion piece talking about it. Okay. So,
Okay, but it
we're.
was an edit. It
No,
was
no,
well, who
wait.
said it though? Tell me who said it though.
It was from, it was, fuck, what was the article? I can't remember, but there was some article when they just
Wasn't it
spoke
the
about.
founder of the thing or somebody close to NED?
In
It
any
wasn't
case, though,
just an opinion.
you could, I can't remember, but you can try and tell me then why, like, where the proof is that they were trying to fund a far right takeover because I can't like
I'm not saying
every
they
time
were.
someone throws this at me, I see nothing.
I
I see
I
like
actually don't believe they were funding a far right takeover at first. I think
okay.
the far right was able to gain influence because of the breakaway regions of Donbass. Since nobody in Ukraine really wanted to fight that civil war other than fucking insane Nazis in the beginning of the war, those were the ones that end up getting the funding. It was the people who were willing to fight, and those are usually the crazy Nazis were the ones.
Okay, I mean, I don't even know. I'll just take your word for that again because I don't really know the composition of the Ukrainian National Guard in 2014.
No, no, I'm not. No, no, no. This was before. This was before. I believe this one might have been before they actually started integrating those battalions. These
But
were like volunteer militias
But
fighting in Donbass.
do you see the difference here though is like you keep on appealing to like conjecture, you know, like
What conjecture?
the US gave money to these organizations, then there was a coup, there were some far right people of the coup, therefore we must have funded we must have like had an influence in this coup that definitely wasn't, you know, just Ukrainians
No, we
rising up
did have
against a corrupt
influence.
government. So like
Color
do you see
revolutions
how this
are
is
often
do you
funded
see how this is
by.
like very very different to like
Uh,
a few weeks after the coup in Chile when Kissinger basically just came out and said we're not letting this country turn communist. Like this is the kind of difference here, right? Like people keep saying that it's all covert that we don't find out until 20 years after. That's actually not true. People knew about this at the time. Same with Iran,
no,
same with El
I'm saying
Salvador, same with the Contras.
we don't find out the full story until 20
So
years
what do you
after
okay,
because enough a lot of it has to do with the time it takes for like independent researchers to go out and interview people. Some of it also depends on like as people get older, they're more willing to talk about their past and more open about it. Like there's a lot of different like things that happen that take a long time for us to know what happened in the past. Or a part of it is just like declassified CIA
that
documents.
just makes it kind of convenient for you though, doesn't it?
No, it doesn't actually, because I would love to give you like complete proof that this was all by the CIA and this was completely orchestrated. But right now we just have things that we know. We have a pattern, or we have a pattern of how US engages in regime change overseas, and we're seeing that in Ukraine. And that's how we're reaching these
I
conclusions.
mean, I would maybe
And
argue then
the money that was pumped into like Ned in Ukraine and like Open Society or whatever, the other one by
George
George
Soros, yeah,
Soros.
yeah, go on.
Yeah, that has a lot of influence in Central and Eastern Ukraine.
So
So,
I mean, I've looked at some of the breakdowns of these funding, and it seems to just be like, first of all, the United States has done
yeah,
equivalents to this in every Baltic state, and we haven't been
yeah,
like,
I know.
yeah.
That's why there's Nazi memorials everywhere
Well,
there.
no, that's not why. There are Nazi memorials because these regions were like basically fucked between the Soviet Union and the Nazis during
No,
the
no,
Second
no.
World War. That's
You're
why.
doing the double. You're doing the double genocide theory, which is
It's
just
true though.
Holocaust.
Like,
No, no, it's Holocaust revisionism. There's nothing the Soviet Union did that comes in comparison to Lebensraum. Can you tell me why Hitler wanted to invade Eastern Europe in the first place?
that's not where I
No,
was going.
tell me. No, no, no. Tell me why.
Oh,
If you
jeez.
think the
Why Hitler wanted to
Soviets,
invade Eastern Europe? Is that what is that what you're telling me now?
yeah, yeah. What? Explain Lebensraum for me.
So I mean, I hear different versions, but the idea, first of all,
Is
because of racism against Slavs, and second, because the idea was to gain as much land as possible to prepare to like take over the whole world. Like, yeah.
No, it wasn't. It was
Well, that is actually
specifically to
part of
settle
Lebensraum. Yeah, but go on.
Germans, and it was It was built off Americans' manifest destiny, and it was specifically settle Germans in the East. That's what Lebensraum was.
You
It was the extermination of Slavs,
you
just like the
completely
Native Americans, so that Germans could live there,
so you've completely skipped over what I was going to say, which is that
which is
you know how the UK, like you said, that it says a lot about the UK that we have statues to Nazi collaborators and pro-Nazi people, like well, even not really Churchill so much, but like David Lloyd George, Edward VIII. Like we have statues to these people, right? And they were pretty pro-Nazi. But if I told you that the average Brit has no fucking idea that these people were connected to Nazis, you'd probably buy that, right? Like it's a
I
lot to do
mean,
with
probably.
ignorance, right?
I don't know your
It's
guys'
exactly
education
it's
system.
exactly the same because I've like watched like interviews and stuff like this when it comes to Ukrainians. Like when it comes to Bandera, like even though he's like a very very divisive figure in the country, a lot of the affection that people have for him isn't a lot of it's just down to ignorance because to a lot of people in Ukraine Bandera was the guy who fought against the Soviets, you know, like the guys who
But
were
where did
guilty
they
of the
get that
Holodomor
idea?
and
No,
shit.
no, no, no.
So
You're skipping again. You're skipping over like a whole process, which is indoctrination. Where did they get this idea that Stepan Bandera was a national hero to them?
because people get whitewashed,
Who taught
right?
it to them?
What, the
Yeah, and
Americans?
it's
I
the
don't
same.
know. What are you trying to say here?
No, no. I actually no. This isn't an American. No, this isn't directly Americans' fault, but I think from what I remember reading after the Soviet collapse in '91, I think there was like this one Ukrainian nationalist who got control of the archives in Ukraine, and
Mhm.
a lot of the history that's written in those Ukrainian history books is based on his um what would you call preferential, or the way
Yeah.
the way he interpreted that archival information and the way he wrote down history. So yeah, it's a lot of indoctrination,
Yeah, that's a very
but it's
common
still
thing. So, which actually kind
okay,
of
but
supports
it's
my point then, because I would
no,
say
it just
that
makes everybody implicitly part of a, it just makes you're not defending these people. You're just saying
mm,
that the current government is actually a pretty far right government if they're able to rehabilitate Stepan Bandera.
well, just to be clear, the current government, I think there was an offer, there was a proposal to revive his national hero status, and it was rejected by the current parliament. So, no, but also, like, that's probably why the far right presence in Ukraine, I would say, is fair. Like, obviously, they're a right wing country. They're an Eastern European country. Of course, they're right wing. But like, that's probably
No, but
why
Russia is also pretty
That's
far
probably
right. They
why
don't.
the right wing party of Svoboda like collapsed after 2014. They've been in like what, between 1% and 2% of the vote ever since. So
Okay, I'm not going based on it's not only about the parties that get into parliament. It's about the influence the far right has outside of parliament. The fact that like people like the Azov Battalion are part of the military means they have influence within the military. The fact that um, Azov was allowed to have an HQ in Mariupol that's overwhelmingly pro-Russian, there's like a reason for that. They're trying to manage. They're trying to manage people's. They're trying to manage government. What was it? Dissent undemocratically. You agree with that, right? So we could see
wait,
undemocratic. We could. I'm trying to show you that just because Swoboda is not democratically elected doesn't mean that they don't have an outsized influence in in government. It
it's
doesn't
just
have to be through
it
election.
does. I think it does make a pretty strong point as to like
No,
what
it
we
doesn't.
should do about their presence. Like I don't know what the like. What are you? Because whenever people talk about Azov, I always get into this dead end
I'm
because
not
I'm
only
like,
talking about Azov. I'm talking
I
about
know. Okay,
multiple. I'm just
the
using
far right,
Azov
and
because
so
everybody knows
whenever
Azov.
we talk about like Nazism in Ukraine, right? Let's just say Nazism in Ukraine. Whenever I hear that, it always feels like a non sequitur because I have no idea where people are going with this point. Like I don't know, is there like a prediction? Is there a policy prescription? Like what exactly is it? Does it mean that
Um,
Putin is like valid when he says that denazification is one of the demands? Like what?
no, my biggest problem with it is that America is funding it. My other problem with it is that the nationalism that is promoted within the Ukrainian government and onto the Ukrainian public is specifically Western Ukrainian nationalism. Ukraine has been bilingual for a long time, and and Ukrainians who speak Russian or a mix of Ukrainian and Russian are identify as Ukrainian, but they don't identify with Stepan Bandera or the nationalists in Western Ukraine. This is a specific nationalism that is being promoted in part thanks to American funding on in Ukraine.
It's funny because like one
And
of the worst things you can do to make a country more nationalistic is to invade it, right?
well, I mean, yeah, but again, it looks like, well, again, it's hard to say right now. We're in the middle of the invasion. You gotta wait for the peace treaty and afterwards
So do
to
you?
see
I mean, like
what really happens with Ukraine.
I just wonder if you're like,
I've heard some people saying Ukraine might be integrated into Poland. You think that might happen? I don't think so.
bro, I have no idea. Okay, like it's, yeah, whether the war goes on for another year, another 10 years of like stalemate, I don't know. So,
I
but that's
mean,
why it's like,
I'm pretty, from what I hear from the pro-Russian people is the war might end once they get all the territories of Novorossiya.
yeah, I mean, they're good. I mean, it's going to be in their interest to move the goalposts because of how much of a disaster the first few months have been. Um,
I think it changed. The first month or two was a complete disaster for Russia, but right now it looks like Ukrainians are losing pretty hard. But again, like
um,
you don't really know what's going to happen. But right now, I think because of the breakthrough in the eastern region in Donbass,
yeah, I mean, Ukraine has managed to
Ukrainians are
recover
suffering.
Kharkiv. They've managed to recover Mykolaiv. Yeah, I don't know if it's like a, I don't really know if it's Ukrainians losing at this
I
moment.
well, we'll see because I'm hearing supply issues, but again, you don't really know. It's the Fox War.
Yeah, but I
That's
think
why I usually wait for the peace treaty.
out of interest, what do you think would have happened if no one in the West had helped Ukraine?
Oh, I'm pretty sure it would have. I actually, if nobody was interested in
Wait,
Ukraine in the first place,
what?
this
What
war
are
would
you,
have
a
happened.
fucking
This only
liberal?
happened when Ukraine started to veer towards pro EU, pro NATO, and wanted to join it and started receiving NATO training from NATO.
It's a pretty
NATO has been training.
pretty poor
NATO has been
excuse, isn't
trained.
it? Like,
No, it's
if the
not.
Ukrainian
This is
population wants to lean westward, then yeah, I don't know. That's a very good
again.
excuse to
It's
invade.
mostly
But
the
yeah.
West Ukrainian population that leans westward. It's not the East Ukrainian
Okay,
population.
but like every country has like a north, south, east, west divide, right? Like that's why
No,
there's a
no, no,
plurality.
and no. The Western Ukrainians speak a different language than Eastern Ukrainians. It's a little bit more than just like, oh, every country has a north, south, west divide. These are they even Western Ukrainians have a different view of Ukrainian nationalism than Eastern Ukrainians who are more pro-Russian. They probably see themselves as being like Eastern Ukrainians probably see themselves as being different from Russians, but still being like one people or like descendant of one people based on like their national mythos.
I
While
mean,
Western Ukrainians see themselves completely different from Russia and they call Russians Mongols.
okay.
So
I mean,
like,
like how many?
but
Okay, wait. Like again, you could say this about like Switzerland or like Belgium, where there are different languages. Like
well,
again,
Switzerland is
the thing
different
I'm the,
than like but so oh and also Belgium isn't even like a real country. I think it was created by the British after the Napoleonic Wars.
I mean, there's
So
okay.
like
Like
the
listen,
Dutch and the French speaking regions were kind of just pushed together.
yeah. I mean, hey, comrade, there's no such thing as a real country, right?
I
Countries
mean,
are made up by
it
like blood and
well,
conquest.
yeah, it
Yeah.
is obviously it's a social contract, but we make it real by like through all these myths and like through socialization we make it real. Like I don't think like if we use Russia as an example, I don't think the people who lived in Kiev and Rus will have anything to do with people who live in modern day Russia. But modern day Russians believe that they originate from the people who lived in Kiev and Rus.
Hmm.
But like in it, but this is like 1,000 years of history. Like that's not those are not the same people. They people in Kiev and Rus lived completely different lives, completely lived under completely different like ideology and belief structures and like economic systems that resemble nothing like modern day Russia. But Russians still believe that those they're the same people. Like not that's how like that's like their national mythos. So what I'm saying is in Ukraine there's a sharp divide between Western Ukrainians and Eastern Ukraine, and what the Americans are supporting is Western Ukraine, and it has a pretty shitty history since it draws some of its mythical origins from Stepan Bandera and the OUN during World War II. And like you
Like
shouldn't support that if you're a socialist. Like you don't have to like be you don't have to be like pro Russia or something or like anti NATO. But you could be like, hey, this is kind of messed up that we're funding this strain of nationalism that's pretty like fucked up. Like you wouldn't fund these same nationalists in your own country. So why are you funding them in
I mean,
another
couldn't I
country?
just push you the other way and say that like Eastern Ukrainian nationalism is like very like pro Russia or like probably full of like Soviet apologia and shit like that? Like I feel like
I
every
mean,
kind
it's
of like
not the same as
nationalism.
Nazi apology. Yeah.
But you're
That
but then
there's
I'm
a
gonna
real
say that you're
material difference
but then
between
I'm gonna say
Nazis and Soviets.
then
Can
I'm
you
gonna
stop comparing them as they're the
but then
same?
I'm gonna say that you're overstating the Nazi apologia of Western Ukraine.
I'm not overstating because Stepan Bandera is their national hero.
He's not a national hero. He had that
Yes,
rescinded
he
in
is.
2011 and it's not come
Bro,
back. It's not been
why
allowed
is
to
there a
come back.
statue of Stepan Bandera in the city of Lviv? That's where he fucking committed the genocide of Poles and Jews. Why are you putting a statue there in there? That's fucked up. That's
Again,
like if I
like
put a
we
that's like
have
if I put a statue of Robert E. Lee on a in like where he massacred a bunch of black people or
yeah,
something.
and do you think
Like on the
that
same
well they kind of did do that, but then I think a lot of people would say is that those statues of Confederate heroes are still to this day very divisive. It doesn't speak to the nature of the
no
entire
that's
United States of America. The
that
same way that
actually does speak
statues
to the
of Edward
nature of
the
the
Eighth
entire
don't.
states of America of how white supremacist it is. The fact that you could still have a divide like that in fucking 2022 means that it explains what I'm talking about because that divide came from a movement of Confederates trying to rehabilitate their image after the war. You're actually showing me of how you're actually giving me a pretty good example of how of like of the nationalist divide between Western and Eastern Ukraine.
So,
Southerners try to rehabilitate
rehabilitate, yeah.
their Confederate losers after the war, and
But I'm
that's
gonna
still
say
around today.
that a
And that's the same
problematic, or
problem.
like I'm gonna say
And
that
that's the
like
same problem.
if you
It's
have
more than problematic. That's you're literally
okay, I'll
supporting the
use okay,
Confederacy.
okay,
Not you.
I've
I'm saying the Southerners. They still have this weird image of the Confederacy that doesn't
yeah, they
match with what
do.
actually
And
happened.
by the same token, if another country went in there trying to reshape them by force or invading like one of the southern states, I'd be against that as well. Yeah.
No, 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 you wouldn't, because that's what should have happened in the Civil War. The Reconstruction failed. One of the reasons the Reconstruction failed is we didn't go far enough in the South. We should have killed or imprisoned or taken away all the property of the slave owners. We didn't. The Southern slave aristocrats were able to hold on to power in the South after Reconstruction because of how poorly it was handled by Andrew Johnson and all the other apologists who tried to work with the Confederates after they lost, rather than to punish them and to make sure that they were never able to hold on. They were
I
never
just
able
have
to hold
a,
on to
I just have,
power.
sorry, like just based on what you're saying right now, I've got a question. You know how after apartheid ended and Mandela gave that speech about reconciliation and peace and nation building, do you think he was just being a bit of a cuck?
I mean, it kind of. I mean, it's really. I don't know much about Nelson Mandela, but I don't. I can't speak to apartheid in South Africa like that. But if anything, if we see modern South Africa now, don't they have massive wealth inequality between the black population and the minority
Yeah,
white
but
population?
it would just make me wonder how much like um
You maybe there should have
it
been
would
more
make
violence done
well
on them
no it yeah well
after
that's why
apartheid
it
ended.
makes me wonder how much like slaughtering a bunch of the white settlers after apartheid ended would have been a
I'm not
great
saying
idea,
slaughter.
right?
I'm not saying just slaughter. I'm saying there are multiple.
Well, you're
They
talking
should have
about
taken the
executions, right? Like
not only
like land
execution.
confiscation.
Yeah, land confiscations. Yes.
Do you think if the
Making sure that they were not able to gain any power afterwards, which includes land confiscations, but their ability to you got to take away their ability to accumulate wealth. You got to take their ability to connect with other people that agree with them. You can't keep all these Southerners in the same place so they could just try to rebuild their own standing in the post-war South.
do you
This is the Reconstruction wasn't a success because America became an apartheid state afterwards. You understand that, right?
well with like Jim Crow, right?
Yeah, you understand that America wasn't able to rebuild the South because of how America handled Reconstruction. The South was able to the people the slave owners in the South were able to maintain power. If you needed to take away that power, which includes sometimes, unfortunately, executions. If somebody is willing to die for slavery, are you really going to pity that person for getting executed?
Well, that's the point, is the people who were willing to die for slavery will have fought and died for it, but then the people who
No, no, no.
surrendered
I'm
will
not.
have
No,
surrendered.
no.
Like,
Those are
of course, if you
okay.
surrender,
Just
you're
'cause
not willing to die for slavery.
no, I'm talking about the people who just waged the whole war. It doesn't matter if they were um aristocrats
Well, I don't know. Like,
or the poor white Southerner who wanted to one day own a slave too, because that's how they were socialized. That's what they were taught to believe, that the only way to make it in the South was to own slaves at some point.
okay,
And
so
if they're willing to die for that belief, what do you do?
I mean, we didn't go as far as you're saying we should have with Germany after the Second World War. A few people
Actually, we
were,
should have went further. The problem is
but why?
America.
Germany's doing all right now. Like,
Bro, America used those fucking fascists to fight covert wars, not only in Europe but around the world. What are you saying? This actually this shows my point that if there wasn't enough denazification in the West after the war, since since people like Otto Skorzeny, Reinhard Gehlen were able to go on and form their own little private spy agencies, or I think Otto Skorzeny is the architect for modern private military contract.
Yeah,
Like
so that I mean, but
this is a
okay.
forgot that there's a reason you don't learn this shit in history because
No, well, I
how would
know.
you
Okay,
think
look,
about
look,
your
okay,
liberal
please, like,
government
okay, wait, wait,
if
wait,
that
wait,
same
wait.
liberal government was funding those fucking
Okay,
assholes?
I do get a bit frustrated when you like act as if you're educating me. Like I know,
I'm not.
like von
It's
Braun
okay to
ended
be
up.
ignorant, bro. It's okay to be
No,
ignorant.
no,
You said things
you're
I didn't
telling me.
know this
So, like, I
conversation.
know
It's
that, like,
fine.
I know that von Braun like went on to like join, I think
No,
he
I'm
joined
not
NASA
talking
or some
about
shit.
von
Like,
Braun. I'm
but yeah,
talking
like
about
I know
people
that
like
a lot of
Otto
like, yeah,
Skorzeny.
okay,
I'm
okay.
talking about Reinhard Gehlen. I don't care about scientists. It's fine. Actually, the one good thing America did was take their scientists and use them for their own means.
So
That's like
I'm
that.
guessing you would say that the Soviets were wrong to utilize Nazis in East Germany as well, right?
It depends. Are you talking about scientists or military and
Pretty sure they incorporated military as well,
intelligence?
didn't they?
I remember them taking scientists. I think they had a few military people in East Germany, but they were spied on heavily. That's from again, this is years ago, so I don't remember.
I'm just really wondering because, as far as I know, like the big denazification thing that Russia is quite proud of was Finland, right? After they pushed back against the Nazis in Finland. But as far as I remember, that was
I mean,
just
I don't
like
think there were Nazis. I think it's more important to call them nationalists
in Finland.
because Poland and Finland they weren't Nazis. They were ultra nationalists. I think
Well,
Finland was neutral, right?
no, Finland sided with the Nazis when the Nazis when Russia attacked when Russia attacked Finland. Yeah,
Uh, did it? Oh
yeah, and
shit, I
part of
forgot about that one.
denazification was like was taking it was just taking Nazis out of positions of power.
Yeah, so that's fine.
Yeah, not fucking executing them after they've surrendered. I don't know. I always thought like being a
I
leftist
think
was more of
in
like a
some cases,
rehabilitative justice kind of a deal, you know?
no, it's fine. You could rehabilitate anybody you want. I'm just saying, in some cases, some people just cannot give up what they believe in. It happens. Like if you believe in something very strongly and you're willing to die for it, like what do you do with that person if they're not willing to like move past that belief?
Well, it depends. Like if you've built
It's a real moral question. Like I'm not
well,
expecting you to give me a nice clean answer.
yeah,
It's like a very big
we're miles away right now, right? But yeah, like given that like
yeah.
every European country has at least some Nazis in it, usually if
No,
they're in a
it's
position
more
where they
than
can't organize and they can't do anything with their
yeah,
beliefs,
but
then
in
they
Ukraine you
just live and they
can.
get sad, right?
Yeah, but in Ukraine you can. That's the problem.
Well, what's gonna happen? Like
That specific strain of nationalism is promoted in Ukraine. That's the problem.
I don't think it's the same kind of nationalism that like maps on as a one-to-one with Nazism, though.
No, I mean they literally praise Stepan Bandera.
Okay, but
Like that's their hero,
like
bro.
you
Like
said, that has a lot to do with ignorance, not just. And as well as that, he is not their de facto national hero.
but
He
we're
is
talking
divisive. Like even within
no,
Ukraine, even
no
within Western Ukraine, he's a divisive figure. Like this is not like
yeah.
this is not the
If he was
ethos
such a
of this is
divisive
not the
figure, you
ideological
wouldn't be putting
umbrella of
up
Ukraine.
statue of him. You wouldn't be putting up statues of him in
Bro, there are so
Lviv.
many statues of divisive figures. Churchill statue gets defaced every single year. Confederate statues are divisive even though they still exist. The existence of
I'm
Thomas
the
Jefferson is a divisive stat. Like, come on, yeah, but just because there's a statue, that means that like they're not a divisive figure? Are you
dude.
seriously
Also,
giving me that?
you're underplaying it by calling it devices. I'm saying the reason Stepan Bandera is more than just a divisive figure is because this guy literally collaborated with Nazis. And also, I'm sorry, but I can't speak to UK, but America is a very white supremacist country. Like, yeah, no shit, there's going to be statues to Confederates, and no shit, our country is white supremacist. So every founding father is some sort of a crazy white supremacist.
Didn't Margaret
Like
Thatcher
Thomas
collaborate with
Jefferson,
fascists in Chile?
without revolution, you can't really like get rid of that like base ideology. Like maybe you could reform it all the time, but that means you're trying to, let's say if you wanted to get rid of the influence of Thomas Jefferson or Robert E. Lee, you would need to not have the United States anymore. It would have to be something else, a new constitution, or
Okay,
at the very least.
we're talking like a very long-term project, okay?
Oh
I'm
yeah.
pretty sure
Also,
you agree
somebody
with
said
that.
Prescott Bush worked with not the Nazi government. Yeah, a lot
So,
of there was a divide with the bourgeoisie in America, whether they were pro Nazis or um pro I guess more England and more uh American. So
mhm.
that's like a divide within the
So
American
the
bourgeoisie at
problem
the
that I
time.
don't think any of this gets, first of all, when you're saying that every country almost in the West has this problem, it's kind of like, it's kind of getting a bit of a
It,
reduction factor. But when you
no,
say
no,
this
no.
about,
I'm not saying.
no,
I'm
I'm
not
not
saying
finished.
every
Sorry.
problem. Okay,
When we
go
say
ahead.
this about,
Sorry.
Ukraine, it's like if we're talking about fascism or Nazism, then like if Ukraine wasn't helped right now, the country would get rolled. And I don't know if you saw all the bodies piling up in on the streets in Bucha, but we'd have that all over. Like we would have fascist militias that are paid by Russia to go into cities where civilians would get slaughtered. I don't really know what the meaningful difference is here. That like surely you would want to stop
Russia
that.
would have never invaded Ukraine if it wasn't for Western meddling in the first place.
I
Like your whole thing
wait.
presupposes.
Do you think so? Like that's the condition that Russia will only invade a country that's being meddled in by the West. That's
Yeah,
when
that's what happened in Georgia. It got it was it was it got I actually I heard from a few sources saying that the Georgian president at the time got tricked by Cheney into thinking he was going to join NATO or something like that. But I think there's a BBC article saying that NATO or the US provoked the war in Georgia. Yeah.
yeah. So if you, I think someone suggested that they might have a future in NATO that they might have a prospect for NATO in the future. That's a good enough reason for Russia to invade them.
I mean, yeah,
It's not even like there was any kind
you're
of like ethnic argument
I'm
for
all
that
I'm
either.
saying
Like
if no also all if any country ever decided to put a military base in Mexico, whether it be China or Russia, that country Mexico is going to get steamrolled, which makes sense. That's
which
part of like
I would have
America's sphere of
like
influence.
I would
Like
oppose that. Like if it, yeah. Wait.
I would oppose
Wait, first of
putting
all, they didn't
foreign
build.
military bases in Mexico
It
too.
wasn't bases though, okay? It was them talking about potentially joining NATO, okay?
Yeah,
So if China was speaking to like a Mexican president tomorrow saying like, "Oh, maybe we'll get you involved in the like Chinese
it's
alliance
a
or
bit
whatever."
more than
And
just
then
talking about it.
and then America invades Mexico. That would be wrong, wouldn't it? That would be a really bad decision.
If there were serious talks about uh, uh, China building military bases in Mexico,
That would be
yeah,
a
actually, there's a good example of this right now. Look at the Solomon Islands. Look how angry America is over China building military bases in the Solomon Islands right now. I think it was, yeah, it is military base in the Solomon Islands, and that's nowhere near America. That's like in the middle of the Pacific.
I'm going to bring you back to the same question is do you think America would have been justified in invading Mexico if China wanted to join them into a military trade deal or whatever, like into a military
Yeah,
alliance.
yeah. If China was going to set up military bases, train their units, put their weapons in Mexico, yeah, it makes sense why America would invade Mexico. I'm sorry, but that's just how it works.
I
Like
think that's a
I'm not trying to take a side here. This is just a um descriptive like I'm just explaining to you
okay.
why putting military bases next to an enemy country is a bad
And if
idea
you're
for the country you're putting those military bases in.
and if you're against it, I would imagine it's probably fair for people to oppose the United States invading Mexico, right?
Yeah,
And
it is fair
probably to
to.
protect the Mexicans because that's not the
Yeah,
kind of reaction that should be getting encouraged, right?
yeah, but yeah, I wouldn't support people sending weapons to Mexico because you're just trying to create a long drawn out conflict at this point.
But then I don't think
we agree that Mexico has no military capability on its own to defend against America, right?
Mhm.
So any way for any help by other governments is there to just prolong a war in Mexico to weaken America, like what America is doing in Ukraine right now.
so. Again, like I don't really see why suggest you're basically saying that like you agree with the idea that a country talking about joining NATO is not a good reason
It's
for
not
Russia to
just a
invade
country.
them.
It's not if it's within Russia's sphere of influence. It's a serious threat to Russia. Yes, maybe not invade, but then again, it depends how serious those talks were.
But we say
And
sphere of influence, that's just another word for imperialism, right?
it's yeah. Well, it depends how you define imperialism, but it is, yes, in a oversimplified way. Yes, I personally define imperialism as the economy a of the junior partner, or the country that's being imperialized is used to extract raw resources to be brought back to the mother country so it could be manufactured into finished products.
But this is where you're kind of losing me though, because Russia was fucking about with Ukraine before NATO was ever on the table.
That's
Like,
part. Ukraine has been always Russia's red line. This was part of Russia's sphere of influence since the Russian Empire.
so
It-
isn't that so? If we're talking about what powers do, then doesn't that mean that Russia's behavior is pushing Ukraine to want to join NATO so that that doesn't happen to them anymore?
Not necessarily. It,
Why not?
it, what do you mean by pushing them?
So when
What,
Russia
what,
is doing things like trying to push into
what
the
exactly did it do?
so first of all, Russia was there was a dispute over that island in Crimea in 2003. It was
Hmm.
basically pretty well known from as early as 2010 that Russia had ambitions to annex Crimea. When Russia attacked Georgia, they used the Sevastopol port to attack Georgia, knowing that any retaliation from Georgia would have struck back at Crimea, which was part of Ukraine, meaning that Russia were going to potentially forcibly involve Ukraine in a war. I think when Russia starts doing shit like that, then I would imagine that Ukraine is pushed as a sovereign people to want to join NATO so that Russia stops behaving like that.
No, not necessarily,
Okay.
because you would have to weigh the risks of joining NATO versus staying with Russia. If Russia says this is my red line, you're not allowed to join. You either have to find your another way of asserting your sovereignty, or finding a new patron. If you're using NATO as your new patron to quote unquote well, you're essentially substituting one puppet master for another. But if you're doing that, you have to know that what the risks that are involved with this, right? Like,
Even though,
would you my question would be to those people is getting invaded worth taking out an IMF loan?
well, it wasn't for an IMF loan, right?
Well, it is.
It was
It's not
over.
over, but that's what happens when you join the West. Ukraine is a peripheral country. As if a
Mhm.
periphery tries to join the West, that's what happens. They just get exploited by their financial system, or used as a staging ground for the American military.
Yeah, so they choose. So in your terms, though, they're just choosing one exploitation over another, and obviously they go with the more popular one, which we've already covered. Didn't
It's more controversial than
didn't
that
wait 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 wait
because
wait
it's
wait
not
wait wait.
popular. It's not. If I think if it's something that's going to be popular, it has to be over. If you're going to be joining a NATO or something like that, it should be a little bit more than
The
popular.
problem is this
Also,
doesn't really track. Like in 2010, uh, the prospect for Ukraine joining NATO was put on the shelf. It was like they were rejected. So
that's in 2010. Yeah. Also,
Was there any
Ukraine was
indication
never
of that
going to
coming
join
back?
NATO. America was lying to Ukraine this whole time. Like, I hope people realize that America was not even serious about Ukraine joining NATO. It was
So this
just
is so
dangling it
you've
in
got
front
so
of
you've got
them.
two problems now. First of all, you've got the prospect of Ukraine joining NATO leaves them vulnerable to a Russian invasion, but then also the knowledge that they're not going to join NATO leaves them vulnerable to a Russian invasion. Do you see how Ukraine can't really win here?
Well, it can. It could stay neutral. It could not try to integrate more with the EU economy and NATO.
So the argument then is
Or yeah.
so basically you're telling the average Ukrainian, if you don't want to get invaded, you basically just have to be Russia's bitch for the rest of your existence for all eternity,
And you,
even if you don't
yeah,
want to.
no, yes and no. That's what happens when you live in a country that's like Ukraine or Lithuania. You think Lithuania has its own foreign policy? No, it's just a puppet of EU and NATO.
Yeah, but I think they're pretty happy with their position right now because they're never going to have to worry about Russia
Aren't they?
invading them, right?
Let me know if they're still happy after a few more months of inflation and rising costs of
If
living.
they had to choose between inflation and cost of living and being invaded,
No, I'm talking about are they s- are they still going to be happy with being in NATO if if the price of food, gas, and everything keeps rising?
I imagine they'll
Because
probably say
that's only
something like, "Yeah, fuck, the cost of living's a bitch, but at least I'm not getting invaded." Yeah, that's what
who
they'll
is
probably
going
say.
to invade them? I don't I maybe it's just like our American brain, but invasions are very expensive. Like Russia is doing this out of necessity, not out of like the joy of conquering the world. Like I don't know, like a cartoonish villain.
You
Like
keep, I mean,
well,
you're
you
saying
have to
it's a
show me evidence like these countries are actually going to get invaded.
well,
Like
they're not going to get invaded because they're part of NATO. That's why they're
no,
off the
but
table for
you have to
Russia.
give me evidence that those countries were going to get invaded by Russia
Well, I don't know. Like
before they joined the
Russia does seem to like kind of have a pattern of
does
doing
seem, or
this.
do you have actual evidence of of Russia having of invading other countries that it wants to annex?
What, like whether it's Transnistria or Georgia, like South Ossetia or Chechnya or
Also,
Ukraine? What? Yeah.
The people of South Ossetia and Abkhazia, they wanted to join Russia over Georgia because Georgia was a very nationalistic government after the fall of the Soviet
I'm
Union. The
pretty sure that's not
The
true.
Georgian Soviet Socialist Republic used to have minority rights for Abkhazia and South Ossetia. After the fall of the Soviet Union, Georgia started to become more nationalist and started to force those regions to adopt the Georgian language.
I'm
That's why they were more than happy to to cede from Georgia and to be with Russia.
South Ossetia was
Russia,
not.
for all its Georgia, I mean Russia, for all its faults, is a federation. It's not a nation state.
I don't think you're correct there. I don't think there was any like meaningful majority of Russian support in South Ossetia. Like I'm almost 100% sure of
Mm,
that.
no, they were again. They preferred to be both Russian, not not Georgia. That's
Where
why.
where are you
Why
getting that
would Russia?
from? In any case, that still does. Even if that were true, that wouldn't justify the annexation.
Uh, no, not necessarily. I don't think anything necessarily justifies annexation. It's whether or not the condition allow for the annexation. Like it's more of like, oh, it's more of like, yeah, I understand why this annexation happened more than like, yeah, this annexation was justified. Like I understand why Crimea was annexed by Russia. I
Hmm.
understand that the people in Crimea, for the most part, prefer Russia. I understand people in Abkhazia and South Ossetia did not like to live under Georgia and probably prefer to live under Russia. That's fine, but it does nothing. It doesn't necessarily justify anything. At the end of the day, like geopolitics lives in like the Hobbesian state of nature shit. So it's more of like, do you have the ability to assert your own agency or to follow through your own your own like, are you able to achieve your own goals given your material condition? Like Russia would have stopped the Baltic countries from entering NATO earlier if it was not in such a shitty position economically and like just in general in the early 2000s, late 90s. That like one of the reasons Russia is doing all of this now is that it's in a better position to assert its own interests than it used to. That's why we have this war in the first place. Like America wants to weaken Russia, and uh, and Ukraine is a stage is America's staging ground for it.
So I don't. So yeah, but you're basically saying that Russia's justification for doing this is to assert itself. Like,
Yeah,
okay, yeah, there's a country that wants to assert itself, but
its own
if I want to push the again, this is where your
its
great
own
power
special
theory kind of
interest.
falls apart, because then I could just say, well, if Russia wants to do that, then the United States and the EU are just as legit to
Yeah,
respond and say, no, you can't.
I never said they're not. I'm just saying you should look at your government critically when they sponsor certain factions within a foreign government.
Well,
And I'm personally
okay, well,
against it because I don't want my taxpayer money, my taxes going to Nazis
which
or
means you
some
want,
far right
which means
faction.
you're okay with Ukraine being ruled by an army which is, let's face it, full of
I mean,
fascists, right?
I'm not okay with it, but
Well, no,
that's just
that's the choice that the universe has given us, this choice, right? Like
no,
Ukraine either
yes,
gets rolled or it defends itself. Yeah.
it does. It's not defending itself. It's
Well,
being
it
pumped
kind
full of
of,
money by Americans.
yeah,
It,
it's
it
being
can't
pumped full of
defend
money so it
itself
can defend itself. Yeah.
no, it can't defend itself by definition because it doesn't have the industry to defend itself. It doesn't have the
I
proper
mean, you're just like
military.
this is
It has
just
no military
you're being pedantic. Like they're being
until
funded to
NATO
defend
started
themselves.
training their troops. It didn't even have like a. It barely had a military.
So you're just being pedantic. Like, okay,
About
they've got
what?
help. They're still. That doesn't mean they're not defending themselves. Even if they got help.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay,
The
fine.
only,
If you
like
want
you
to,
just told me,
but they're puppets, though.
the
It's
only
a
way they
proxy
can,
war.
the only way they can defend themselves is with the help of Western powers. Then yeah, they're defending themselves.
Okay, but okay, you know what? If you want me to say, yeah, it's fine for them to accept patronage from Western powers. Yeah, I mean, I'm okay with like when the Soviet Union helped Vietnam or Cuba, or when Cuba sent military some soldiers to Angola.
Hmm.
I'm fine with that. I think what you're missing is
Well, why is that any
and that
different? Wait, why if Cuba
yeah,
helping
you know
Angola and
what?
Namibia? Why is that different
You know
from
why it's
what's
different?
happening in
Because
Ukraine?
of who we're supporting. That's my
Oh,
problem with it.
okay.
If you're supporting far right nationalists or just nationalists in general, and you're in a liberal country, you should ask yourself what does that mean? Is there like a like you don't is there a contradiction between liberalism
But that's
and
why you're
the
incentivized.
stated ideals of liberalism and what what liberals actually do when push comes to shove?
Well, I'm going to take a wild stab in the dark and say that Ukraine is probably a bit more liberal under the Ukrainian government than it would be under Russia.
No, it wouldn't.
Well, Crimea was, right? Like
No,
there
they're
weren't any
just
Tatar political prisoners in Crimea before 2014.
you think you think a country that's trying to abolish the Russian language just because
They
it
weren't
doesn't
trying to
sit well
abolish
with
the Russian
national.
language.
Yes, they were.
They
They
weren't
were.
trying to.
uh,
Okay, which clause? Which
They were
clause of the law was doing that?
oh my God. Yes, the language laws didn't specifically abolish it yet, but were they not teaching that? Were they not teaching that in the schools?
Can you just tell me one clause in the law that gives you a
Oh my
problem?
God.
I just want to hear one.
I obviously don't have the laws in
Then
front of
why are
me.
you saying it's an abolishment of language?
Because that's the catalyst for the actual civil war. And they were trying to promote Ukrainian Western Ukrainian language and Western Ukrainian nationality over Eastern Ukrainian nationality and Eastern Ukrainian languages.
They
I'm not
had.
even saying Ukrainians don't even speak like actual Russians. Well, at least not some of them. Like if you speak Russian and you listen to some Ukrainians, you'll notice they speak mixtures of Ukrainian and Russian.
Which is why the law generally allowed for that as well.
No, it didn't. It started to promote a different language. Also, we don't know what was going to happen next because as soon as that law passed and as soon as that happened, you had started to get revolts against that the current Ukrainian government.
What? Jesus Christ! What year was the language law passed?
Was it 2015?
It was 2019.
No, I think it was 2015.
It was introduced. It was passed. Yeah, it looks like it was passed in 2019, wasn't it? Like,
Okay, it was
passed in
but it
just
was
as
introduced.
Zelensky came in.
You're telling me the peace candidate tried to pass the language laws?
It was, and no, Zelensky criticized it. Zelensky said that there were basically like every human rights org said there are some parts of this law that are good and some parts that have problems. Yeah, that was basically Zelensky's position. Yeah, because Zelensky's a native Russian speaker. Yeah.
No, his position was you could speak whatever language you want. I'm pretty sure he was against the language laws. Also, there's like a Hungarian minority there too that was like that would have been affected by the same language
No,
law.
EU languages were exempt. Apart from, I think, for like the public sector.
EU languages were.
Yeah.
That's funny.
For most clauses,
it was
yeah.
it was the decommunization law. Right. Okay. Which was the de-Russification. Yeah, that's right. The city I was born in got its name changed. It went from Dnipropetrovsk to Dnipro because of the decommunization. What the fuck? you serious, bro?
What?
That's funny. They actually started to rename cities because they sounded too Russian, bro. And you're
yeah, it's a good reason for a civil war, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, it is. If you identify with a certain nationality or a certain belief structure, and you see that coming under attack, some people are going to go up in arms. You're talking about defending Ukrainian sovereignty, and then you're also downplaying these people defending their own identity.
Well, that's the problem, is that like Ukraine is probably one of the only countries in Europe that, and every human rights org said this as well, is that Ukraine is basically one of the only countries in Europe where a language law like might have some justification because of what Russia was doing, not only for the last 200 years, but even just recently when it came to the fact that they were like utilizing broadcast networks to push Russian propaganda, especially into the Donbass and into Crimea. And that was why like a lot of these language laws were just about regulating like the output of media. Like I don't think there's any problem with like innately with promoting a national language.
You're in your analysis of this, or I don't even know what to call it, you're both okay with free press censorship, and
it wasn't censorship.
Yes, it was.
What did they do to press? What was the exact demand they made of the press?
I don't know, but you just said it yourself. They were trying to they were using language laws to prevent Russian propaganda from entering the country.
That's not it was okay. Do you know what they were trying to do with regards to like press? It was that if you printed in Russian, you had to do a Ukrainian equivalent. You just had to have both. That was it.
No, they were censoring Russian press in the region too.
Zelensky banned 3 outlets because they were broadcasting Kremlin propaganda.
This thing has been going on since 2014. So,
but again, like you're just, I can agree with you that the language laws were a problem. Zelensky came in and opposed it. So. And people have had problems with it ever since. Like, yeah, there were issues, but I don't know.
It's
like
all
you're trying
the 2015 decommunization law says that the de-Russification of Ukraine. Again, Eastern Ukrainians see themselves differently than Western Ukrainians. You know that. Like, I tried to explain to you the differences between those two brands of like national identity.
Wait, 2015, you said?
Yeah.
When did Russia start sending their troops in to fight in the Donbass?
I actually don't remember.
2014. It was not a response to the law.
Well, I'm saying this is one of the laws
No, you just
that was
said it
being
was what,
passed.
and you said the language law and the de-Russification was what inspired the revolts, even though
Yeah,
the laws came afterwards.
yeah, because
You're lying to me.
the laws.
You're just making
Okay,
shit.
no,
Fucking hell. Okay,
I'm
sorry,
not
go on.
making shit up. Sorry if I'm not being like clear to you. I'm saying that the regime. What I'm trying to explain to you basically is that the regime that was created after the Maidan Revolution or coup or whatever. I guess you don't. You're a socialist, but you don't even believe in box standard socialist foreign policy. But that's neither here nor there. But you, it, but the regime that formed after the 2014 Maidan
Mhm.
protests was was heavily pro-Western Ukrainian. Like this, yeah, no shit. Yeah, these things came a little bit after, but like after the fighting started, but it was all there. Like it was all there from the beginning. That's what I'm trying to like explain to you. Like this didn't. I'm trying to explain that this current regime is a pro. I mean, it is a pro-Western government, but it's
Mhm.
also a very. It's based around Western Ukrainian nationalism.
But that's the difference is like you keep on hiding behind this. I'm just saying it's descriptive, right? Because if I asked you, is a pro Western Ukrainian government a good enough reason for people in Eastern Ukraine to not only revolt, but for Russia to
But
help them?
It wasn't only a pro-Western
But not
government. It
only
was also
that,
a pro-Western Ukrainian
and whether
nationalism
or not it's
government.
a good enough reason for Russia to send its military in there and to back separatist groups that could barely, I think at their peak before the invasion, the separatist groups couldn't even control like a third of the region, which kind of speaks to
Oh,
how
oh, oh,
limited their influence was. So even if that's the case,
yeah.
would you say that like, you're not going to say any of that's justified though, are you? You're just going to say it's descriptive, right?
What that
The uprisings in the
Russia.
Donbass, yeah.
Yeah, it was they were pro-Russians and they were supported by the Russian Federation.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't understand. And the rest of Ukraine was supported by NATO and the U.S.
But
Like
only one
it
of
was
those
obviously a
sides,
proxy,
only one of those sides was sending troops in and
dude.
recognizing breakaway regions. You see, there's a big difference there.
Well, I don't think Russia. First of all, Russia didn't recognize those regions until like right before the war.
Yeah.
If Russia was pro the Minsk Accords, which would have turned Ukraine into a federal republic or something like that, which basically gave autonomy to the Donbass region. That's what it supported right up to the invasion.
Wait, but obviously autonomy is different from being a breakaway.
It wasn't supported. Okay, was it supporting the breakaway regions? Yes, but was it supporting their independence from Ukraine?
No,
No,
that was
not
before the
until.
invasion. That was before the
Okay,
but they did send Russian
yes,
forces in there.
yes.
I
I
don't
like I said before, this was the proxy war between NATO and Russia. This was Russia's red line. It wasn't going to let NATO come into its backyard. That's what it was. Like I don't know how much
it's
how
just when you say proxy war, it kind of sounds like you're treating both sides as relatively equal, even though
well, no, America is by far the most superior and economically by far like has the overwhelming force than America. I don't. What do you mean by equals?
because no like NATO troops were not in Ukraine. Russian
No,
troops were.
NATO troops. No, but NATO was training fighters to was training Donbass fighters. Maybe not right away, but it was. And the instigation for the Maidan protest was in part because of Ned and its funding for those middle class political activist groups.
I mean, like if you think that's a good enough like so are
I
you
don't
I
think
don't know
that's a good
exactly what you're
enough
saying
reason.
then. Like
I'm not pro-war. I'm saying NATO provoked this war with Russia and these people are suffering all because NATO and America wanted to A exploit whatever natural resources Ukraine had for even for its own needs and B and probably more importantly, was to set up more NATO bases and put weapons in Ukraine as to weaken Russia and to isolate it more.
Yeah, and I
Like
feel like if any
this
one
was
wait, would you maybe agree then that like if any one party is responsible for a lot more people wanting to join NATO, it's probably Russia, right?
it'd be pretty well. That one's pretty hard because you're
Like the
not
desire to join
including
NATO is
the
blasted in Ukraine.
indoctrination.
Well, okay,
No, but
wait. If we're talking about indoctrination, we know that Russia has been broadcasting Kremlin propaganda into Ukraine, especially into the Russian-speaking areas,
yeah,
for years. Okay,
yeah.
and I don't think I'm just really curious. If I had to say which is worse, like Russian state media or I don't know, like American press, what would you say? Do you
It's
think there's any difference there or what?
I don't personally I don't see a difference. It's
Really,
propaganda. It's propaganda geared towards different
you don't see
populations.
a difference
You and I
between
see you
a
and I see how insane Russia propaganda is
Okay,
because
no,
it's not for
this is
us.
the problem though. This is I think I'm seeing the problem now is because you've just equated one like Russian state media, which is the government is able to dictate like
But
as a
that's your
script,
problem. You
the
think there's a
agenda
separation
is
between
able to
government and
dictate
private
is
capital.
able to dictate the agenda of their press. The American press is like kind of divided,
not
and they are
no,
privately owned.
they're not in
They don't have the government whispering in their ear, telling
quote
them
unquote privately.
what to publish.
Okay, first of all, yes, they do. There are multiple instances of the CIA feeding information to media. Second of all, who do you think those private corporations? Do you think they make political donations?
I think
Do you
making
think Viacom?
political
No, I think
donations is not the same as a government-run media, like government-run media outlet, and
I'm
also
trying to.
with oligarchs who are
Okay,
also just right next
no,
door
no,
to
no,
the
no.
president all the time. They don't have to
Okay,
worry
they're
about democratic
oligarchs,
mandates.
and
They don't have to
ours
worry about
is
press standards.
entrepreneurs, right?
Do you think that all Russian oligarchs are comparable to like American entrepreneurs?
Yeah, actually, yeah, they're exactly the same. If you
Really?
think America is not
Would you not
a
say that,
dictatorship of the bourgeoisie, then you're not a socialist. You're just a
bro?
liberal, bro.
Okay,
You're
like
separating.
I know you're just like when you run out of arguments, you just want to call me names. That's fine. I mean, liberal. I'm not
I'm
really
not even.
offended,
I'm
but
not
okay.
insulting you.
Like,
I don't
I'm
care
just
if you're a
wondering,
liberal.
like,
Just be. It's fine.
because I would say
Like,
that when
that's
the
what it
American
is.
government does things, they at least need to manufacture consent to some degree. Whereas, like, the Russian state media can just do whatever it wants. I don't know if there was any American state, like American media equivalent or BBC equivalent of using video game footage and passing it off as war coverage. That is what
Didn't
Russia
we
does.
have Armor? Wasn't the Ghost of Kiev footage started off from Armor 3 footage?
Was that broadcast in the mainstream media? That was on Twitter.
I don't know if it was.
No, that was Twitter, right? That was not like New
also,
York Times or Washington Post pushing out
also,
video game
again,
footage and passing it off as war
I
coverage.
can't believe I have. I can't, this is why history is important.
No, you're
Because you
comparing
don't remember
Reddit
shit from
memes
5 years ago. No, I'm talking about the media that got us into the Iraq War is the same as the media in what you call an authoritarian hellhole.
And if you
There's
look
no
at,
difference. Why was the media asking for a no-fly zone in Ukraine when the war started?
You're moving off the point again. I'm asking.
I'm not. I'm trying to give you. I'm trying to explain to you how these are both propaganda. This is all propaganda.
So
but you cannot see the American media or Western media as propaganda because you're taught to see these institutions as apolitical and rational and
Jesus Christ.
professional.
When did I say they were? When did I say they were apolitical and rational?
If they're not apolitical and they're not if they're not apolitical and they're in what you would call experts or whatever, then it's not propaganda. If it is,
so I'm gonna. Okay, do you know what non-discussion is?
what do you mean?
It's a left-wing thing about how the media in the West lies, because like basically you can make a left-wing critique of the media in the West in that they are basically private companies, which means they will conveniently omit certain things that might be inconvenient to them, like say like the popularity of worker co-ops or something like that, right? Or like left-wing positions. But that's not the same as having an autocratic government telling you what your output should be all the time.
Because I think because when you see the media report on foreign policy, and since you agree with it, you don't see it as propaganda.
So
but I've been following
when the press,
whenever
like, how long did the press spend
pre-
like criticizing Trump? Like, the Kremlin doesn't do that.
Okay, but that's my point exactly. Just because, okay, first of all, Fox News, which is the other half, or the
Mhm.
right-wing media in America is the other half of liberal media in America,
Mhm.
was not criticizing Trump. So that's like half of all people who are politically active and consume political media were watching what you would say is state media, essentially,
Who are they
because they
criticizing?
never.
Fox News is criticizing the president now?
Yeah, because that's not their president.
Yeah,
So you're
because it's
just
not state. It's not the same as state-run media, where the
okay.
media always does what the president wants them to.
No, because it's because we live in a dictator. Why can't I speak anymore? Because we live in the dictator of the bourgeoisie. That means that different factions of capital will probably fight over each other.
Mhm.
Yes, you're right. It's not as unitary as Russia, but it's still the same type of
That's all.
propaganda.
Okay, wait. Even if that's what you believe, then that's fine. Okay, like, that's all I need to say that Russia's is worse, right?
No, it's the same. It's made by the same. It just because it's not directly by the state. All that's saying is that within our bourgeoisie, there is some sort of debate. Within the Russia's bourgeoisie, there is no debate. They're unified around Putin. And ours, there is debate on which factions of the bourgeoisie would control the levers of the state. That's the difference.
And another
It's
difference.
not difference in the propaganda. It's difference in the outlooks of our bourgeoisie. And it's a difference of how the rich people deal with politics.
And another difference, a pretty significant one, is that Russian state media
Not Kremlin.
is run by the Kremlin. They say what to put out. The president can't go to the New York Times and say, this is what you're going to push out as truth.
American media is pretty united on whatever the State Department is pushing out. So I
American
don't know what you
media
even talk.
will say,
So-
the State Department said this. They won't just report it
No,
as if it's like an unquestionable fact. And also, not to mention,
Yes, they would.
the
Yes,
US
they
state
would. They would
media
say,
in recent years has been saying things like, oh, Russia's going to invade. Ukraine is asking for a no-fly zone. It's not the press saying we should do it. Whereas we've got Russia saying things like Ukraine is
No,
using fucking
the fact-
bats to spread bioweapons around fucking
that the fucking
Europe.
no-fly zone propaganda line even exists is a holdover from fucking Libya, bro. The reason why the whole no-fly zone conversation even exists is because when we were fucking bombing Libya, we were saying, "Oh, we're going to do the no-fly zone because it sounded all nice and daisy because, oh, we're just not letting planes fly." No, it actually means that we're flying our own planes and bombing the shit out of Libya.
So if you're going to say,
That's what the no-flying zone was, and that's a holdover from the last propaganda.
So if you're going to say that the no-fly zone is coming from the press, right? But the government's
they didn't explain what the no-fly zone was in the first place because it doesn't.
You're just going to make my point for me, but keep going. Like, okay, so
no, what?
Because
that the media didn't explain what the no-fly zone was when we were bombing
if the
Libya?
media is drumming up popularity for a no-fly zone and the government is not doing it, does not that show you a disconnect between the government and the media that doesn't exist in Russia?
That's one example.
Yeah, we can name quite a few of those.
Every part of the media since the Ukrainian war started was just following whatever the State Department line was. If anything, the only reason the State Department didn't follow through with, didn't agree with the media, is because lucky for us, they're not as insane as our media. Who in the world?
You're just making my point for me again.
If you knew what the no-fly zone was, if the media actually educated its public back in 2012, this would never even be a conversation. So this is just a holdover from the previous propaganda line.
So you're just making up like another argument in favor of the fact that the state is different from the media in a way that it's not in Russia.
No, I'm giving you an example of how propaganda from the last war peeped into the propaganda of this war, and that thank God we're not crazy enough to follow the same propaganda line, because that would just mean nuclear war.
Yeah, thank God our governments
No,
in the
thank
UK,
God.
in Europe and America have some kind of autonomy that isn't like completely connected to the media. Yeah, that's a good thing. Yeah. Again, like
Oh
I
my
don't know. Do you
God.
want to? If we're going to match
You're
propaganda,
going
are
to
we
have,
going to?
okay, can you give me another example where the State Department and the media is not in line?
Wait, if the media is going to report on intelligence, they have to like
Okay,
they're going to say
speaking of
what the
intelligence,
state
what about
media what
the
the State
Russian
Department said.
bounty on American soldiers? Where did that come from?
What?
Do you remember during the election, there was a story that was being pushed by American media that Russians are putting bounties on American soldiers in Afghanistan, and they were blaming that on Trump because Trump was a. Oh, also the whole RussiaGate thing was another propaganda line, but that's another thing.
Well,
The
RussiaGate led
fact,
to indictments, so
no, yeah. So which one was for colluding with a foreign entity?
it wasn't. Wait, the RussiaGate
What
ended with
indictments
indictments.
was it? Yeah,
was
but
the
what indictments? Was it
was
colluding with Russia, or was it for some other financial crimes?
wasn't it to do with the fact that Russians were, I can't remember, but
No,
wasn't it the
it
case
was
that Russia was buying up like social media space to push Trump into power? I know RT was
how
kind of doing that. Like, yeah.
okay, but who was colluding with Russia for that? Did they catch somebody colluding with Russia for that, or did they just indict people for separate financial crimes?
Wait,
And
that's
also, yeah, somebody is saying Hillary did just got busted for feeding those stories to the paper. Yeah, there was actually a recent article about how Hillary was pushing the Russia pay thing.
but do you see how
Also,
we
Michael,
have
by the
like
way, discount diagnoses. Michael Flynn might be a Turkish agent, actually, from what I've heard.
so do you see the difference there between the media gets a bit like hyped up about something that's kind of true as opposed to
No,
the Russian state media just making shit up?
no.
Do you think the
Wait,
bioweapons
what
have
do you
any
think it
merit?
was kind?
The Ukrainian
I
bioweapons?
honestly, if they do, that would be so funny that they decided to put important bioweapon labs in fucking Ukraine. Like that would have been hilarious.
Yeah, it's a good thing
But
it's a good thing there's no evidence for it
yeah,
apart from the Russian
yeah,
state media, which definitely thinks there
yeah,
are.
yeah. That's unless there's other information coming out about that. I'm pretty sure
Well,
it's
no, the
whatever
Russian
the
state.
Russian
So,
state
but
media.
the difference is
Yeah,
like
it's
if
their
evidence comes out later, that doesn't let the Russian state media off the hook because they were categorical about it
or
before that.
no. What we're seeing is war propaganda, which is again just like a fact of life when you're at war. But you see a different you see a separation between private capital and the state, and I'm saying that those two are connected. You can't make money, you can't become a billionaire, you can't own the biggest media companies in the world without the government on your side, you or the government in your pocket, or some connection with the government. Like I don't know how to like how to better explain
You
this
don't.
to you.
So
Maybe
okay,
I
yeah.
could give you
You don't
historical
think there are
examples
different? You don't
when
think
the
there are?
railroads
You
were
don't think
being
there?
built in the United
You don't think
States.
there are different degrees
There
of
were
connection?
subsidies
Like,
by governments.
would you agree that there are different degrees of connection?
What do you mean? I
As in,
think the
the
I
U.S.
think
state,
the
like
Russian
U.S.
state.
like capital, is connected to the state. I know, is it like David
No,
Harvey's
I
state
think
capital? Stop, David. You could say like state capital nexus. Yeah, I agree with that. Sure, that's a difference between the state and capital being like one controlling the other. I would say that's a big difference between them being connected, having similar interests, having influence over one another. Then they're just basically the same thing.
1 second. I gotta respond to something.
This has gone on for way too fucking long. Oh god. Oh shit.
Yeah. I don't see a difference too much because of the dialectical connection between the capitalist class and the state. You can't separate those two. Yeah, maybe you'll get some variations of the media that's different than a state media broadcast would. But
Mhm.
in all practical material purposes, as in the goal of that media is the same.
Even though Western media opposes governments like all the time.
What's up?
Even though we've already conceded that American media outlets will oppose their governments like all the time.
No, they wouldn't. That's not true. They
Fox
never.
News, well, depending on who's in power, the media will oppose Biden or they'll oppose Trump.
Yeah, that's only because there is disagreements within the bourgeoisie, not because that
which is
this media is free and independent.
which is a
All you're saying is that within the Russian state, there is no factions of capital that have any influence. Within the American state, there are different factions of capital that have influence on in our society, and they're free to do that because America is more of like is more of a democracy for the bourgeoisie than Russia is.
yeah, because I mean, as much as I, you know, don't think it's perfect, I'd say a liberal democracy is probably better than like the autocracy that they have in Russia, right?
Mhm.
Which is why I would
I
probably
mean,
say that liberal democracy is preferable to autocracy or kleptocracy, whatever the fuck they have in Russia, right?
if you're a citizen of that country, you're probably okay with a liberal democracy. But if you're not a citizen of that country, I don't know what the material difference would be.
Okay. Is there anything
If
else you want to talk
you
about?
nope.
Cool. All right.
All right,
You
see ya.
take care. All right. Bye.